Millions of children will miss school on the biggest day of strikes for over 10 years.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock. It's Wednesday, the 1st of February. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GBNews with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And leading our news on this, the first day of the new month, teachers across England and Wales will join 500,000 workers walking out today in the UK's biggest day of strike action since 2011. Train drivers, border force officials and university staff are also striking, with Downing Street warning of significant disruption.
Unions have responded by urging the government to stop pretending the strikes will go away, as ambulance workers announce further dates for industrial action this month.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are facing rebellion over their economic plans as senior Tories blame them for dire forecasts. It comes as the Bank of England is predicted to raise interest rates to a new 15-year high tomorrow.
And the actor Alec Baldwin has been formally charged with involuntary manslaughter in the fatal shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the set of the film Rust. Prosecutors accused him of being on his phone during firearms training.
First of February, new month, same strikes. Oh,
Pinch and a punch.
you just enjoyed doing that.
I did. Yeah.
You just punched me harder.
No, I would do, but, you know, we're on TV. Pinch and a punch. I got in there first. It's February. I can't believe it. The time's flying by.
It is. So today, schools, 7 million children will miss lessons as teachers join the biggest day of industrial action in over a decade.
Yes, 85% of English and Welsh state schools will be closed.
Do you know, that really helped me.
Members of the National Education Union are demanding a fully funded, above-inflation pay rise. Around 23,000 schools will be affected by the strikes. Today, the first of 7 planned walkouts, with both primary and secondary school teachers taking action.
Education is chronically underfunded. There are many teachers and support staff who are relying on universal credit and food banks just to get by. With inflation, over the last 10 years, teachers have lost 23% of their pay and support staff have lost 27%. This then means that a third of teachers are losing the job within 5 years of starting. The government like to say that teachers have had a 5% pay increase recently, but this actually came out of school budgets rather than from the government. So there's now an even tighter squeeze on schools, less money for children, less money for their education.
We strike with a heavy heart. I would much prefer to be in my classroom educating and supporting my students through their curriculum and through into their exam period. We don't take this lightly. However, some action needs to be taken by the government. One day of disruption, hopefully, might be a catalyst for change in this profession, a change in our salaries, an increase in our salaries. And my concern is if we don't take action now and immediately, that we are going to pay the price, and students will pay the price in 5-10 years' time when this country cannot maintain the national staffing levels in primary and secondary education.
Whether or not the school stays open is up to the head teacher. Teachers have no obligation to tell them whether or not they will be striking, so some parents will arrive not knowing if there'll be a class for their children to attend.
Although I am in a position where I could have them, I'm very well aware that others would not. And I think it's just not a responsible thing to do. As much as I support strike action in the way that they're, the achievement that they're trying to get to, however, actually, not knowing as a parent is very, it's anxious. It's a really anxious, worrying time. So I do often request to take my children out for holidays and are faced with fine action. I just think that 1 minute we aren't allowed to take our children out of school, and then the next minute teachers are allowed to just not turn up.
Some teachers say that post-pandemic industrial action should be avoided.
Well, I don't agree with strike action. I don't think it's going to achieve the desired effect. I am empathetic that, with the cost of living and everything, that teachers do need to be paid more because we do have a recruitment crisis in this country. But I don't think strike action is the most effective way of achieving this.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that teacher salaries in England fell by an average of 11% in real terms between 2010 and 2022. The government says that most state school teachers in England and Wales received a 5% pay rise last year, which came out of pre-existing school budgets. Talks between unions and the government are ongoing. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Well, train drivers from the ASLEF and RMT unions will also be on strike today, with another scheduled for this Friday.
OK, we're going to go live to a train station, Euston in London. Paul Hawkins there for us with the very latest. It looks quite quiet around you, Paul.
Yeah, there's no picket line assembled yet, but there will be later on today. You know, it's funny, Eamonn and Isabel, I was standing here on the first day of industrial action when this rail dispute started, which was the first sector that saw this industrial action. So way back in July, I literally stood on this spot and was talking about how train drivers, railway workers from Network Rail and the rail companies were going on strike because they felt that they weren't getting a fair pay rise. And now all these other sectors have joined in, but essentially the dispute hasn't shifted. So today it is train drivers, most of whom are represented by ASLEF. A couple of hundred are also represented by the RMT, and they are unhappy with the offer that the Rail Delivery Group, that's the body that represents the train companies, have put on the table. So the Rail Delivery Group are offering 4%, backdated to last year, 4% this year. According to ASLEF, that was not and could not ever be acceptable, and its General Secretary Mick Whelan said the union was open to further talks, as the RMT's Mick Lynch has also said. So talks are ongoing, but it's not enough. The Rail Delivery Group say it is a fair and affordable pay rise that will put drivers' pay up from £60,000 a year to £65,000 a year. But the dispute goes on, and as ever with these rail strikes, very patchy service across England, which has a knock-on effect for services heading into Scotland and Wales, and the advice is to check before you travel. Of course, a lot of people kind of accommodating these strikes now by working from home. So if you can't send the kids to school, I guess that kind of helps with that. But the knock-on effect, of course, for the economy is huge. Hospitality's lost £2 billion since the start of these rail strikes. So there's a huge knock-on effect for the economy. And as we heard yesterday, growth, a huge problem for the UK at the moment.
Yeah, indeed. OK, Paul, thank you very much for your analysis, and interesting to look back on where we've come during those months. Thank you very much.
Well, for more analysis, the head of digital here at GB News, Dan Flavey. And Dan has been polling. You've been polling, finding out what the public reaction is to what's going on.
Yeah, so we've been looking at what do GB News viewers think about the strike action. And what we were looking at is, on Monday, the MPs in the Commons voted through new legislation, minimal service levels legislation. And what that will do is mean that there has to be a certain level of train run, even when there's strike action, for example. And what we found is that 62% of GB News viewers support that legislation. They support Rishi Sunak in his bid to basically stop strikes from bringing the country to a standstill.
The question is, would it actually do that? Would it actually stop these strikes that we're experiencing now? And we heard, as you say, in the Commons on Monday, Jacob Rees-Mogg also, critical of the legislation, saying actually it was really badly written.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Labour's arguing as well. They say, look, this legislation already exists in countries in Europe, in France, for example, and they say, actually, it makes no difference. This might sound good, but it has no real impact. If anything, the unions, they're arguing that this legislation will make things worse. They say it may mean that there's this minimal service, that means that there will be some trains that operate when there are train strikes, that means that schools can't shut completely when there's education strikes, etc. But they say all this will do is mean that there are more strike days, so there could be unintended consequences to this.
Interesting. It will be really interesting to see how public opinion responds to this first school strike in England and Wales. And it's interesting so far. I think the Ipsos polling has the public generally on side at the moment, 40% in OK with the public sector strikes. But whether or not this, what's being termed a mini lockdown, people seeing kids going through what they did during the lockdown, whether or not that might shift public opinion. We know that teachers are paid in real terms worse, in terms of the cuts, worse than nurses and paramedics as well.
Yeah, I think a bit like our NHS and what people think about NHS stuff, I think a lot of the public know that our teachers did an awful lot during lockdown. Even when schools went open, they were still helping students by... Some schools were staying open for those students who had to go in there so that their parents could go to work, or they were doing online lessons. So I think the public has an awful lot of sympathy with teachers, more than they do with, for example, university lecturers who are going on strike.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. When the more this strike action happens, the more that I think people could end up getting fed up with this.
Yeah, the more it affects individual lives. That's the thing. The one that would really annoy me would be border control, you know, whether it's a port or whether it's an airport. That could be really inconvenient.
Yeah, and we saw that they took strike action just before Christmas, really disrupted people's Christmas holidays. And they will be covered by this minimum service level legislation. And Rishi Sunak is trying to use that legislation to stop that for exactly that reason, so that people who are trying to go on holiday, for example, do not have their plans completely ruined at the last minute when they're trying to get abroad.
Well, the army kind of showed up border control, didn't they? It was hugely successful. People were actually saying they did a better job, ushered through more quickly. I was just looking at Sarah Vine there, top of the Daily Mail. Does anyone give a fig about all of us hard-working taxpayers whose lives are being wrecked by strikes? And she's got a really interesting column today saying, it seems to be you're either in one camp or the other. You're into the protest or you're just cracking on, working hard, but just kind of getting used to the daily disruption.
Yeah, and I think that is what people find most frustrating, and I think today will really show that for people, because it's because of the sheer size of the number of strikes that are happening. Everything is being disrupted. If you're a worker, you find that you can't get your train to work today, so you're going to have to work from home. But then your child's school is on strike, so you've now got to deal with a childcare issue while trying to work from home at the same time. If you have a loved one who uses the NHS, then you're going to find that that's also being disrupted at points over these strikes. And I think that's what's really going to get to people. It's not just individual issues, it's that every bit of life seems to be being disrupted at the moment.
And we can't see, Dan, any signs of breakthrough on any fronts. I mean, the thing is, we can talk about these disruptions, continuing strikes, but there doesn't seem to be any common ground.
Stalemate. We're at complete stalemate. And the government will point to the fact that we've seen inflation starting to come down, as this is proof as to why we can't give in now and give pay rises. They say, we've said we get inflation under control, we can then give you the pay rises we need.
It's the Bank of England's job to get inflation under control. I always think it's a bit of a cop-out when they say that.
Yes, and I think there has been some frustration amongst some people, particularly on opposition benches in the House of Commons, that the government has said that their aim is to halve inflation this year. And Labour going, well, hold on a minute. You've not got much to do with that. And when inflation was going up, you blamed the Bank of England. Yeah. Now it's coming down, you're taking all the credit for it.
Interesting. All right, Dan, thank you very much.
Dan Falvey is our head of digital news here at GB News, and he's always interested to hear from you, so get in touch the usual ways. Running any other polls today? Anything anybody can take part in?
That's the only one for now, but I'm sure we'll have one going later in the day.
How people are feeling about the school strikes, how it's going, something like that, because I know, certainly in my case, one of my children's classes we've been told will be closed, the other one will be open. That kind of even more confuses the childcare situation. I'd be interested maybe to get a little flavour of how people are feeling about it.
We can certainly get that up and running and see what our viewers think.
Great.
Yeah, is that poll still open there?
That poll is now shut, this one.
Shut, yeah. No. OK, my friend, thank you. And so are you. You're not shut. We're done with you
for now.
As well. 13 minutes past 6. Bank of England expected to raise interest rates for a 10th time in a row tomorrow. Base rate forecast to increase to 4%.
Yeah, and it comes as shop prices hit record highs. Costs are 8% higher than last January, with the peak, we're told, yet to come, according to the British Retail Consortium.
Well, our business and economics guru, Liam Halligan, travelled to Kent to hear how higher rates will impact businesses and the property market.
The Dog at Wingham is a popular pub, hotel and restaurant in deepest Kent.
Mark, great to see you. Liam Halligan, GB.
Owner Mark Bridgham works all hours to make this business a success for himself and his 30-strong workforce. But high taxes, rising costs and, above all, soaring energy bills means the Dog is struggling to make a profit.
In a nutshell, our gas and electric was £36,000 per annum, and under the current price cap, it's around £80,000 per annum. And when the price cap ends, it's going to around...
In April?
In April, yeah, like a couple of months away, £120,000 per annum.
For months, Mark hasn't paid himself a wage, despite running a multiple award-winning business. Inflation means his costs, especially for food, are spiralling. And in the current climate, Mark can't risk passing on those price rises to potential customers.
We are offering the best deals we've ever offered in a desperate bid to keep the place at least breaking even.
And 9 successive interest rate rises have squeezed the Dog's guests even more.
Their mortgage going through the roof, their shopping going through the roof, their utilities going through the roof. So they coming out to a lovely place like the Dog is one of the first things that get cut.
For years before the pandemic, the Bank of England kept interest rates below 1%. They then went even lower during COVID lockdown itself. Since then, rates have risen steadily to 3.5% in a bid to tackle inflation. Near the Kent coast in Sandwich, James Halligan, no relation, runs the British Hovercraft Company. A successful manufacturer, he exports 80% of the craft his company makes. But with wages, taxes and interest rates all rising, James says the pressure on his business is simply too much.
It's putting more and more pressure on businesses like ours. Our wages have to go up, and we'll put those alongside the fact that our energy costs have gone up, our interest rates are going up, and we're facing a situation where, as exporters, the confidence in the UK is at a low.
So what of the impact of rising interest rates on the property market? Down the Kent coast in Deal, estate agents say a 2008-style house price collapse won't happen.
I think interest rates will go up a little bit further, but perhaps not as much as we feared.
So you don't see a big house price fall then?
No, I believe more in a correction of value as opposed to a collapse.
The Bank of England is likely to raise interest rates tomorrow, probably to 4%. But inflation is now falling as the economy slows. So an end to these rate rises could soon be on the horizon. Liam Halligan, GB News.
Going to hear lots from Liam tomorrow with that interest rise expected to take place from the Bank of England. 16 minutes past 6.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. And a 4-year-old girl has died after being attacked by a dog at a house in Milton Keynes. Police say she died at the scene. No arrests have been made and the dog has since been put down.
Retail prices are at a record high after a rise in inflation last month. January saw the highest inflation rate in the food category, and meanwhile the clothing and footwear category saw an ease during the New Year sales.
A Which study has found huge differences in the amount of caffeine being served by high street coffee shops. For example, a medium cappuccino was found to have anything from 66 to 325 milligrams of caffeine, depending on the brand. Experts warn it could be an issue if you've been advised to limit your caffeine intake for medical reasons.
I'm not sure I understand that caffeine story because I don't drink it. So are you paying to have caffeine? Do you want caffeine if you drink coffee?
What is it good or bad? I think you just want to know what you're consuming. I mean, I think as a consumer, I just assumed a coffee was a coffee. I got a little hit of energy. But when I was pregnant, I was advised you can only have 1 cup of coffee per day. Well, what if I was going somewhere like Costa and getting 325 milligrams? Is that considered the daily? I mean, it's a bit like alcohol. Is that a unit of alcohol, or what is the correct medical amount? Whereas if I went to Starbucks, I'd be getting, well, 66 milligrams. So perhaps.
So
just be good to be informed.
Are you being shortchanged at Starbucks? Is the inference? I understand about the dosage of caffeine, but also is the product you're getting of not as good a calibre? 66
milligrams of caffeine at Starbucks will cost you $4.25. At Costa, you'll get 325 milligrams, and you'll only pay £3.85. So Costa's come out of this for caffeine addicts like myself.
If you want caffeine,
pretty well.
But if you just want taste, if you say, well, the Starbucks thing tastes.
Yeah, but coffee equates to taste. The stronger the coffee, the better the taste.
You know what I can't stand?
Yes.
Coffee breath.
Yeah, sorry, you get that all morning.
And people who smoke fags.
But do you know what else I did? Because
worse.
You can't stand it. You were complaining about my shoes the other morning.
Was I what?
Yeah, you said, what's happened to your shoe? Have you been driving?
No, I didn't. No,
so
I
I
was
went
just
and bought
curious.
brand new ones.
Well, that's
because I was
silly you are.
concerned that you thought they were disgusting. No, don't take them off. Oh, no, I dropped it. Bear with. Oh, bear with. Oh, I can't reach.
Normal service would be... See, they're very nice shoes. I wasn't saying anything wrong with the shoes. The shoes are like kitten heels here. They're very, very nice.
But you were complaining.
No, I wasn't complaining.
Were all scuffed.
I was sitting behind you and I was saying,
shoes.
Why are they worn on the inside and why are they worn in certain positions? Do you use them for driving? Or...
Well, I just worn them for years. But anyway, I thought, oh, well, I better get new shoes. Eamonn's noticed I'm a scruffball.
Oh, there you go. I'll throw the mic. Don't throw the mic. No. All right, okay. There you are. Very good.
Right. We'll be back after the break talking about Alec Baldwin. He's in a lot of trouble. We'll have all the details for you after this.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGiven. Windy in the north first thing, but the gales do ease during the rest of the day. The showers also ease in the far north, and it's mostly dry in the south, although there will be a slither of rainfall creeping in from the west to affect parts of Northern Ireland, southern and western Scotland, as well as northern England. This warm front, it will eventually bring milder air with it, but for the time being, actually it's quite a fresh start to the day, a bright start with the best of the sunshine in the south, but also increasingly bright skies to the north of Scotland, with the showers brisk at first and then easing later. Those gale force winds are also tending to come down later in the day in the far north of Scotland. Here's that area of cloud and rain, though, that I mentioned, the warm front, pushing some steady rain into western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. But it's a little milder across the board compared with Tuesday, 7 or 8 Celsius in the north, although in the far south, not quite as mild. The winds, however, becoming less of an issue through the day. The strongest of the wind gusts pushing into the North Sea, and then calmer conditions for all of us overnight, but not completely dry. There will be some steadier rain into Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England for a time, the rain heaviest over the Northwest Highlands. But with the increased cloud across the UK, well, it's a frost-free night for the vast majority. 6 or 7 Celsius in the south, 5 or 6 in the north first thing Thursday. It stays damp, however, across Scotland, especially in the west of Scotland during Thursday itself. There'll also be a lot more cloud across the UK, I think, on Thursday. And that cloud will give a few spots of rain over some western hills, even across southwest England. But the mostly dry trend, I think, continues in the south. And another trend to be aware of over the next few days is that things are going to turn milder. It's not going to be that sunny. There will be a lot of cloud in the sky, particularly on Thursday and Friday, and particularly in the west. But you can see how those temperatures rise, 11, 12, even 13 Celsius in places.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 6:24 still to come on the programme this morning.
Do you know how much caffeine you get in your coffee? This survey that we're talking about today says it varies massively. At 6:45, we'll be finding out where you can get the most buzz for your buck. And there's massive price differentiations in what you're being offered there on the high street. And,
there is, yeah. Greg's, £1.75. And you get 197 milligrams. They've come out pretty well out of this.
It better be a good coffee in Pret. £5.39. £5.39 for a cup of coffee. 180 milligrams of, well, of what? Of caffeine in that.
Yeah, well, you only have to put calories on menus now. You know,
Well, I always
we should
had
be
this.
putting your content, your caffeine content.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the calorie content's more important sometimes than the price.
Yeah.
As well. Just after 7, we're going to bring you house price figures. Nationwide will release their latest index, and we'll be right across that. And if there's anything you want to say, like for instance, you've been very vociferous about the teaching strikes today.
Jack says, I've recently completed a fine art degree. I'm now doing my teacher training. I would never strike. I'm so grateful to do a job that makes a difference, and I think teachers should be grateful for their position.
Until you get your pay packet.
Well, I think you can be grateful for your position, but also be upset about a real terms cut in your income. But, you know.
Olivia says, schools are woefully underfunded, and I support every teacher striking this morning. Linda says, all these people striking are crippling our country.
And Catherine says, these strikes don't seem to be achieving anything. The only people who are poor children.
Yeah. I deliberately didn't read that one out because it didn't make sense.
But I got the thrust of it. She was saying the kids are paying the price. And I do agree. I don't think kids should be dragged into... Anyway, we digress. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews@gbnews.uk. Now then, the Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin overnight has been formally charged with involuntary manslaughter over the fatal shooting of the cinematographer whilst on the set of the film Rust.
He has vowed to fight the 2 counts against him. His lawyer calls the case a terrible miscarriage of justice.
Well, this morning we're joined by showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield, who has more of the details for us. Hello, Kinsey. Good morning to you. Look, just explain what the prosecutors are saying, you know, why they've charged him then with involuntary manslaughter.
Well, that's right. He was charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, which is a Class D felony punishable by 18 months and a $5,000 fine. That's the first one. Now, the second one is also involuntary manslaughter, but it requires proof that there was more than simple negligence involved in the death. And there's also this additional element, which is a firearm element. And if he is charged with this second count, that's potentially 5 years that he could face. You almost wonder if they charged him with this, tougher element. So perhaps in case they don't think a jury might get him on it. So, they have the 18-month involuntary manslaughter to fall back on. I'm not necessarily sure. Now, David Halls was the assistant director who actually handed him the gun, said it was cold. So Alec Baldwin assumed that it was, did not have, it was a safe gun. He took a plea deal and has agreed to testify against the armorer on set and Alec Baldwin. I'm sure that both are very nervous by that instance. But what I thought was really interesting what the DA said about Alec Baldwin, which I had not necessarily noticed before, was that when Alec Baldwin was first approached by police officers on the set, he says, "I'm the one that shot the gun." However, in interviews that he gave to media, several media outlets throughout this process, Alec says that the gun just went off automatically. It just went off, he told ABC. So I think that really is going to hurt him in the end, giving those interviews, when you have contradictory video of, the body cam, them approaching him on the set, him saying, I'm the one that shot the gun, versus him doing these media rounds saying that it went off automatically. I don't think that helps him.
Well, Kinsey, the film is incomplete, and I was reading recently that it will be completed, that they're going to continue filming. I just wonder, would any of us go and pay money to sit down and watch it, or what would you feel like if it popped up on the television or whatever? It's just sort of, I think I would feel very guilty about enjoying it.
Right. And what was so odd is this is there was the civil case that was settled with Helena Hutchins' family. And one of the agreements was that Helena Hutchins' husband was going to be an executive producer on the movie. So that to me, that makes it even feel, ickier that the husband of the victim is now producing this finalized product. I don't know if a lot of people would go to see it. I mean, I just think that this is, I would throw it away at this point in time, because there's so much negativity surrounding it.
While we've got you, Kinsey, I want to talk about Pamela Anderson, because over here, I'm sure it's the same in the States, there's been a huge publicity flurry. The Netflix show, which has been driven by her, was on last night, and her new book out. It was being reviewed in the papers over the weekend. I read a really, and I mean really long article about it on Sunday. Every detail in this book seemed to be... And I was glued. I couldn't stop reading it. And absolutely extraordinary detail. Stuff about being molested by a babysitter, being gang raped in high school, and saying that she thinks that most people that go into the glamour modelling industry have been sexually abused in some way. I mean, it was shocking stuff, and all this detail about how actually, if she'd have been able to decide her own life, she'd have been a librarian.
I mean, I have walked away from this new documentary. I haven't had a chance to read the book yet, but more in love with her than I've ever been before. And what I do love about this book and the documentary is that it is I overcame adversity. I overcame horrific things, and I'm so content with where my life is right now. It's positive, it's uplifting, it's happy. And yes, she's had a hard life, but at the end of the day, she's so grateful for where she is. And it's, you know, how can you not admire that? Also, I love the fact that she says Tommy Lee is the only love of her life, which I'm sure his current wife doesn't appreciate, but just, you know, the romantic in me loves the idea of Pam and Tommy reuniting one day.
They've tried that a few times. It hasn't worked out very well.
He's the one with the sex tape, isn't he?
Yes, although she doesn't like to call it that, does she?
No, we don't. No, we don't. That was just a home video, okay, Eamonn?
Oh, right. I'll tell you this, Kinsey, of all the people, of all the big stars I've interviewed over the years, she wouldn't have been an obvious attraction to me. I wouldn't look and say, I never really thought one thing off her one way or the other. She wasn't my cup of tea, really. And she walked into studio one day when I was interviewing her, and I just went, wow. She has an aura, she has a presence. Well, to me, she had anyway. I wasn't expecting to find her overly attractive, but she was jaw-droppingly attractive.
Yeah.
There was just something about her. Have you ever met her, Kinsey?
I have not. She was at Barnes & Noble today, and I missed her. I'm so mad.
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a bookstore. She was signing books here in LA. She's right down the street. But, you know, anybody but, you know, I'm happy to hear that she was good and kind to you, Eamonn, because you've like crushed my dreams about Meg Ryan with your Meg Ryan story.
Oh, she's
so I'm
a weirdo.
Grateful that I can love and adore Pamela Anderson.
Yeah, Rihanna was another.
Meg Ryan shouldn't be allowed to do interviews. I know she has them written into her contract, but she's absolutely phobic about being on camera or being interviewed. And, you know, she has a real attitude about it. She should just be banned from interviews, you know. But Pamela Anderson, any day,
Yeah,
no problem.
Well, we always watch Baywatch on a Saturday night. I think my dad was a fan growing up. Must be. Thank you, Kinsey. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Papers, David Miller and Scarlett Maguire after this.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already depressed.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn.
Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back at 6:35. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages.
Guardian, first of all, it reports on the 500,000 workers on strike today. As unions warn, talks are going backwards.
The Express says cash-strapped families are facing the steepest rise in grocery prices since records began.
Times leads with the breakthrough over the Northern Ireland Protocol. We're going to be discussing that shortly. The government's set to sign a deal with the EU, apparently.
And the Eye is focusing on senior Conservatives confronting the Chancellor over his refusal to cut taxes.
And the Mirror takes aim at the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, who faces an inquiry into bullying allegations. He bullied staff like an abusive husband.
Oh dear. Well, look, let's go through the papers now. We're joined by former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Very warm welcome to you both.
Shall I do my abusive husband bit?
No, please spare us. We don't need to.
Oh, but I mean, you know, I want to be Dominic Raab. I wake up in the morning and think, why didn't God make me Dominic Raab? Why did he make me a charming, wonderful person?
Right, David, because you're so charming.
And don't forget the wonderful bit. But anyway, we'll come on to him. Northern Ireland Protocol. I mean, this is one of the biggest load of old rubbish that in all the years I've been interested in politics, because it's a nothing issue, but which the EU are obviously very keen to keep going, and which the Democratic Unionists are desperate to take offence and want to really make this into a big thing. And I think it's time that heads were cracked together, first of all, on the EU side, to get real about all of this. The Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. We cannot have them determining what we can or cannot send across the Irish Sea. But even more bothersome, the Democratic Unionists should have no real friends at Westminster. So what are they doing, effectively boycotting Northern Ireland constitutional changes in the issues that, of having a devolved government, because they feel they have the right to determine what happens. They don't.
But we are where we are. In terms of having left the European Union. And this does feel as though there is, after a long time, a bit of progress.
Yes, I mean, that's why I put it at the top of my list, because I'm in a positive mood.
But actually, I think, David...
You laugh.
I don't quite know what to do with you when you're like this.
Oh.
He's in a positive mood and wants to be an abusive husband. No, I think that this is... I think that David's being a bit unfair. I mean, the government signed the Northern Ireland Protocol, right, which was a bad signing, and then they said, well, we didn't really mean it, we're going to break it. And then 3 prime ministers on, we have somebody who actually understands that you don't break international treaties, you renegotiate them. The EU has, frankly, always said it was willing to renegotiate.
Hey, you're not a pro-EU. I don't mean pro in favour of being a member, but these grotty bureaucrats at Brussels, they are not worth a woman of your quality standing up for.
No, I'm not standing up for them. What I'm saying is, having read the stuff for the last few years, it's quite obvious that it desperately needed tweaking. They understood it needed tweaking. The way to get it changed was not to say, if you don't do what we want, we're going to tear it up and do whatever we want. So I think it's a really good thing. And I think it's quite... I absolutely agree with you about the DUP. Was the way
to get it changed to collapse the government in Northern Ireland?
No, I mean, that's what the problem is with the DUP is, and actually they don't want it changed. They want it absolutely abolished. I mean, they do not want
a border between Northern Ireland and the mainland. In that case, why on earth did they vote for Brexit, right? Because where did they think the border was going to be? It couldn't ever be between North and South. I mean, it was the DUP put us in an impossible situation. And I think what they've done in Northern Ireland is appalling. And I think, you know, to say we're not going to have a government, I mean, it's terrible, absolutely
civil
terrible.
servants running the country, budgets are completely busted, overspent.
Yeah, the health service is in chaos.
Roads,
it needs decisions. It needs political decisions.
I do think it's President Biden obviously coming to visit, isn't he? I think is it on the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement.
Right.
This has been described as really focusing minds on trying to sort out the situation in Northern Ireland. But I'd be interested to see if it might try and help focus on Stormont as well, because what will the leader of the free world make of a...
Well, he'll be appalled. I mean, you're absolutely right.
Once we get over the awful thought that he is the leader of the free world, I mean, really, it is a ridiculous thought.
Well, he is, though.
But he is. No, you are quite, as always, totally accurate in your description. It's just when you say it in beautiful tones, I reel back in horror, you know.
All right, well, we've done the EU. Oh, no, we haven't. We're talking about accession now. And this is
a very
Ukraine's
odd
hope.
story in the Financial Times saying, I mean, it's obviously done on sort of a very few sources, saying that Brussels bureaucrats are trying to get Ukraine into the EU fast. Now, actually, the whole Ukraine problem began because Ukraine wanted to go into the EU, and for Putin, that was a step too far. It wasn't about NATO, it was about EU, because Putin has always seen Ukraine as part of Russia. So actually, and the Ukrainians, I mean, there was incredible riots after the then president of Ukraine reneged on everything. So, I mean, most Ukrainians are desperate to join the EU. But here is a bit of sort of realpolitik is, yes, sounds really nice. But do you know how many poor Ukrainians there are? I mean, the EU is thinking, this is not... Yeah, this is a country that is going to take a lot of bailing out.
Well, because of the corruption, of course, that was the reason.
The corruption, the incredible rural poverty, you know, all of that, let alone a little thing called a war.
Yeah, rebuilding once the war is over.
I can't wait for Dominic Raab.
Well, here it comes. We're serving you that up now. Front page of the Times.
OK.
Number 10 was warned of Dominic Raab's what are termed issues before he was actually promoted to deputy PM.
OK, so I hope you've got your earplugs in. What I find extraordinary is that a man as negligible in terms of his quality as Dominic Raab has become Deputy Prime Minister. He never should have done. He then becomes Foreign Secretary, and he'd rather stay on a beach than go and do his job. But worse than that, look, I'm no saint. I admit it.
Well done.
But I did 11 years as a minister. To the best of my knowledge and belief, no civil servant ever complained about me. And in fact, I liked my civil servants. I used to enjoy meeting with them. We had great times together. The fact that even the permanent secretary at the Foreign Office, apparently, has given the then permanent secretary, given coruscating evidence against him. The man has plainly got a problem. And you have to say, Rishi Sunak has got a problem, because Raab was out, and Rishi Sunak says, "Oh, diseased one, let me clutch you to my bosom, because I want to catch whatever it was that Boris got." And I do think that, you know, that Rishi Sunak has not made a difference to the Tory party because his judgment about some of the people he surrounds himself with is awful.
Well, I think...
Here endeth the first lesson.
And I think that's probably fair. I mean, rumours about Dominic Raab have been swirling in relation to bullying for years, before it's even been out in the public. I mean, certainly in Westminster and media circles.
Absolutely. I mean, a friend of mine who worked in the Department of Justice took retirement because she just thought, this is the end. I mean, he was so awful. And I was talking to another civil servant friend of mine from the Foreign Office who said the change with Cleverly is just wonderful. I mean, finally...
Well, he's a nice man.
Yeah, he's a nice man. That's all he has to be, is a nice man.
I hope he's good as well, but he's a nice man.
And all of them... But, I mean, Dominic Raab, they've still got the template for what he insisted the briefings had to be, and at the top was the director of any department has to say that the grammar is perfect.
I think if you can look into somebody's tax affairs in a week, which we all know to be horrendously complicated, what is taking so long to look into the 24 allegations of bullying? This has been going on and on and on. Just nip it in the bud, Rishi.
And
Yeah,
what the
he's gotta
Tories
go.
obviously hoped for was that Sunak would be a fresh start. But the trouble is, by clutching people like Raab to his bosom, there's been no fresh start. It's the same old, same old.
Well, it's Raab, Braverman. I mean, you just go on and you just think there's going to be more and more and more. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, from fresh starts to fresh air. We go to
Right.
the front page of the Times, and this is about air pollution and very
wood
nice
burners.
things. Yeah, I look at wood burners. I go into someone's house and they have a wood burner, and I think, I'd like one of those.
And they're wonderful because they're so warm. But actually, I mean, the Clean Air Fund did some research last year and discovered that they are the most polluting thing. I mean, they're far more polluting
But why do
than
they do
cars.
that? Because I must admit that I have become an exciting layer of fires down in our country abode.
Yeah.
And I really take pride in my
Yeah.
fires. But why aren't they polluting? Allegedly, they are not. And all they are is bits of wood out of our garden.
No, but you're in the country. In London, you can't have a fire. You can't have an open fire, and that's why. I mean,
What's the difference between a fire and a wood burner?
Wood burners are much more polluting.
He always asks the right question.
Yes,
I
they are
really
more
reeled
polluting.
back.
They are more polluting, but you're not allowed to have an open fire in London. I mean, that's why.
I thought there were restrictions on wood burners in London. I might be wrong.
No.
But are there also not green ways of having a wood burner? Are there not sort of bricks
you could
that are...
yes, but actually, I mean, I was reading an article about it, and actually, what they find is it doesn't really work. But I mean, basically, if wood, as somebody said, I mean, if wood burners were used by the working class, they would have been banned long ago. But because they're a middle class thing,
Although they're horrible. You'd just think that people who would consider themselves to be middle class, always hate these classy, they would have some sense of what looks good. I've never seen a wood burner that looked anything other than ugly and awful.
Oh, no, I love
Whereas
the look
my
of
open
wood
fire...
burners.
I love them.
I love all the above. I do think they're the most romantic things, fires. But how does a £300 on-the-spot fine work? Are people door knocking? I mean, fires go on behind closed doors,
No, but you
right?
have chimney pots.
The privacy.
The
I see the
chimneys,
smoke's coming out the
smoke
top,
comes
isn't it? Yeah, there you go, Sherlock.
but also, I mean, but the whole thing is you can do
have
it now, and
wood burner spies.
nobody does it. And I bet you, I mean, the minute it starts, the Daily Mail will go completely bonkers.
Well, you see, I look at this and I say, are you telling me the world is polluted because of wood-burning fires?
Yes.
Don't believe it.
Yes,
Don't believe
no,
it.
it's the most polluting thing in London.
We're in Ireland, we're having our whole flocks or herds of cows devastated because people think that cows letting out air is greenhouse gases.
Cows farting.
Yeah, but if you go to America, where they have got miles and miles and miles, hundreds of square miles of what are so-called cattle farms, intensive farming at that state, compared to 20 cows frolicking about in a field in Hillsborough or whatever it is. I just don't get why we are always the ones that toe the line, and China and America and Russia and everybody else gets off.
Okay, this is not about climate change. This is about actually polluting and people. I mean, people living in a polluted London. It wrecks.
Breathing in wood. Do you know what the most beautiful smell is?
Your body might not.
Burning turf. Turf fires are absolutely beautiful to smell.
Yeah, which is why so many Irish people died young.
Is it? It's not.
I tell you, it is. I mean, of course, it's bad for your lungs.
To do with poverty or diet or
yes,
climate or lack of sunshine
and lungs
and breathing in turf
and breathing in turf fires.
It's more to do with smoking.
I don't know what they're rambling on about.
Drinking. I just don't get that people are dying in Ireland because of turf fires. They're dying.
What's a turf fire?
Turf.
I've never smelt a turf fire in my life.
Well, there's a great joy that awaits you.
But what is it? Burning grass? No, I'm genuinely asking. I'm not trying to be facetious.
Before coal becomes coal, it's turf.
Is it peat?
Peat.
Yes.
And peat's very precious, isn't it? Now we know that peat absorbs carbon,
and we should not be burning it at all.
Pete Bog, yes.
Stop it. Right, we've got to go. We've got to move on. We're going to talk about coffee, which is my favourite subject in the world.
Right.
So I'm going to say thank you very much, Scarlett, and thank you very much, David, and we'll see you again in about 45 minutes.
OK.
Thank you. So this is about coffee. Personally, I don't drink it, never have drunk it, don't know why, but I like the smell of it, like a turf fire. And a new study...
Apart from on my breath.
Yeah, I like the smell of Guinness, but I don't drink that either. And this new study has found that the strength of coffee varies massively depending on which chain store you buy it from.
And it's quite interesting. Pret's single espresso had 6 times as much caffeine as Starbucks, according to the consumer watchdog Which.
So why does that matter? I have no idea. Here is the co-founder and CEO of True Start Coffee, Helena Hills. Helena, very good to talk to you. What do you make of this? I mean, they've measured Costa, Pret, Greg's, Nero, Starbucks, all of different measurements of caffeine. I have no idea whether it's the caffeine that counts or the taste that counts, or indeed looking at the price of a cup of coffee, it's the price that counts, because it seems scandalous how much it can be for a small cup of coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the caffeine in coffee does vary loads. It's funny because I've been banging on about this for years and now people are talking about it a lot more. But there are loads of variables that affect the caffeine in coffee. So everything from the species of bean, whether it's Robusta, Arabica or a blend, to the rainfall on that crop even. We're talking about a natural product with loads of intrinsic variation. The altitude it's grown at, the brew method, and beyond. So there was another study a few years ago, a BBC one, also of high street coffee shops, found a crazy variation from 50 to over 300 milligrams. And if you add another espresso shot into your coffee, extra tired that morning, you can easily be drinking over 600 milligrams of caffeine in one coffee without realizing. And actually, even if you go into the same store a few weeks later and order the same thing, the caffeine will vary. So those numbers that were just up on the screen, they're not going to be the same if you go in sort of the next day and order the same thing. And that's why you feel so good. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. No, I was just thinking, you know, we talked, didn't we, about the introduction of calories onto menus, and I thought, well, the way around this for people who are breastfeeding or pregnant or whatever, they might have heart conditions that mean they have to control the amount of caffeine that they have. Why not just, you know, put it on a menu? But as you say, that's not possible.
Yeah, that's not possible with freshly brewed coffee because the brew method has so many variations, even from the person making it to another person, that it will just still vary. But it is crazy. I mean, it's why we started our business in the first place, to have a reliably caffeinated coffee. It was the first coffee in the world to do that, because you wouldn't be happy with the massive variation with alcohol. You wouldn't particularly enjoy going into a supermarket and buying a bottle of wine and not knowing whether it was 4% or 40%. And that is the reality, really. And it's why people often talk about feeling different after a cup of coffee versus another, you know, jittery, maybe heart palpitations, and sometimes that coffee feels like it hasn't done anything. And that's why, you know.
Helena, isn't the truth that in Britain we're actually quite used to a poor quality of coffee and we fill it full of other things?
We're getting better, but definitely, yeah.
I mean, generally, in these chain stores, it's not good stuff.
Well, I mean, that is a really good point. I think it's not necessarily just the coffee either. In this country, a really high percentage of us fill our coffee with milk and sugar. So caffeinated coffee in itself is not bad for you, like far from it. There's loads of research now and evidence that's proven the health benefits. So everything from reduced risk of chronic heart diseases, having Alzheimer's and Parkinson's is reduced the risk. And then there was a health study, a nurse's health study, that associated drinking 4 or more cups of coffee a day with a 20% lower risk of a stroke compared to non-drinkers. So all that is great stuff, but coffee can become bad for you when you're loading it with milk and sugar. And that's really common in high street coffee shops, especially because the coffee is, you're right, it's not necessarily as good, certainly not as good as an independent roaster, for example, who are really focused on quality, more so than laser focused on profit per cup. And that means the taste isn't necessarily great when it's black, so people want to add loads of sugar
and milk and things in it. Now, Helena, let me ask you this, right? My esteemed colleague beside me here, she likes her coffee, she likes to get one, and you talk about giving you a lift, giving you a boost and whatever it is. Is it possible to have a cup of coffee? I understand people get the high. Can you have a cup of coffee without having the low that follows? Must the low follow?
No, not necessarily. The crash comes when you overdose, when you overload your system with effectively too much caffeine. It's the same as sugar. So if you're having like a regulated sort of reasonable level that works for your body, you won't feel a crash. And that's really the important thing, is understanding your own brain and body, because something that people may not know is we do not all metabolize caffeine at the same rate. So there is actually a gene which dictates whether you are a slow or a fast metabolizer of caffeine.
Like alcohol, I presume.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a fast metabolizer because I'm actually very sensitive to caffeine. I feel the effects quickly and they disappear quite quickly. I drink loads of cups of True Start in a day. But if you're somebody who feels post-caffeine jitters for sort of hours after one cup of coffee, you're probably a slow metabolizer. And it's worth knowing yourself so that you drink as much coffee as is right for you. You know, how do you feel physically, mentally, emotionally after you drink coffee and a few hours after? It's important, you know.
Okay, really quickly, if you were to pluck a figure out of thin air, because we're out of time, but I really need to ask you this, is 325 milligrams overdosing? I mean, what should your average cup of decent coffee be in terms of milligrams? What number?
Well, 300 milligrams per day is considered the safe limit suggested by most health organisations around the world. A cup of True Start has 75 milligrams, so you can have 4, for example.
Okay, interesting. Perfect.
Very,
Thank
very
you.
good. And talking about interesting and perfect, Helena, could I just say, I love your hair.
I have a wig like that.
Look,
I have a big bob wig for parties, and it looks great. I love it.
For parties? Why don't you wear it in here?
Well, because this doesn't work.
That looks a really good look, good look.
Lovely.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Helena.
Cheers.
Thanks.
I want another coffee now, though. I'm twitching. Need one. Quick.
So what have you learnt at the end of all that?
I've learnt that I love coffee, and I'm never stepping foot in Starbucks ever again.
Why? Because
it doesn't have. It's expensive, and it doesn't give me what I want.
Okay. What you need? Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. 3 minutes now before 7 o'clock. A lot of people want strikers to go back to work today. It's not going to happen. Big walkouts all over the country. We'll be reporting on that after this.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Millions of children are to miss school on the biggest day of strikes for over a decade.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of February. At this stage, Isabel punches me and nips me in a case of, like, it seems abuse, but why is that done?
First of the month. No returns of any kind. Thank you.
Pinch
also the end of dry January.
First of the month. So anyway, what a start to the first of the month on this Wednesday morning, because leading the news...
Yes, 20,000 state schools in England and Wales will be closed today. Teachers are kicking off their biggest strike action in 30 years.
Now, all of this is part of the biggest day of walkouts since 2011. Train drivers, border force officials, university staff amongst those striking. Downing Street warning to expect significant disruption.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are facing rebellion over their economic plans as senior Tories blame them for dire forecasts. It comes as the Bank of England is predicted to raise interest rates to a new 15-year high tomorrow.
1 in 10 children have been exposed to pornography by the age of 9, according to an alarming new report. As the controversial online safety bill is discussed in the House of Lords today, we're going to hear from an addiction therapist who says education is the key.
To our top story this hour, 7 million children are to miss lessons today as teachers join the biggest day of industrial action in over a decade.
85% of English and Welsh state schools will be closed, with the teaching union accusing the government of squandering an opportunity to avert industrial action after talks collapsed on Monday.
And we'll be speaking to the Education Secretary on this programme just after 9 o'clock. Well, teachers will be joining those in Scotland, as well as train drivers, civil servants and border force staff, who are also on strike today, with 500,000 people walking out in total.
Well, let's go to our reporter Ellie Costello. Ellie, reflecting on the dispute between teachers and the government.
Did you know that really helped me?
Members of the National Education Union are demanding a fully funded, above-inflation pay rise. Around 23,000 schools will be affected by the strikes. Today, the first of 7 planned walkouts, with both primary and secondary school teachers taking action.
Education is chronically underfunded. There are many teachers and support staff who are relying on universal credit and food banks just to get by. With inflation, over the last 10 years, teachers have lost 23% of their pay and support staff have lost 27%. This then means that a third of teachers are losing the job within 5 years of starting. The government like to say that teachers have had a 5% pay increase recently, but this actually came out of school budgets rather than from the government. So there's now an even tighter squeeze on schools, less money for children, less money for their education.
We strike with a heavy heart. I would much prefer to be in my classroom, educating and supporting my students through their curriculum and through into their exam period. We don't take this lightly. However, some action needs to be taken by the government. One day of disruption, hopefully, might be a catalyst for change in this profession, a change in our salaries, an increase in our salaries. And my concern is if we don't take action now and immediately, that we are going to pay the price, and students will pay the price in 5-10 years' time, when this country cannot maintain the national staffing levels in primary and secondary education.
Whether or not the school stays open is up to the head teacher. Teachers have no obligation to tell them whether or not they will be striking, so some parents will arrive not knowing if there'll be a class for their children to attend.
Although I am in a position where I could have them, I'm very well aware that others would not. And I think it's just not a responsible thing to do. As much as I support strike action in the way that they're, the achievement that they're trying to get to. However, actually, not knowing as a parent is very, it's anxious. It's a really anxious, worrying time. So I do often request to take my children out for holidays and are faced with fine action. I just think that 1 minute we aren't allowed to take our children out of school, and then the next minute teachers are allowed to just not turn up.
Some teachers say that post-pandemic industrial action should be avoided.
Well, I don't agree with strike action. I don't think it's going to achieve the desired effect. I am empathetic that, with the cost of living and everything, that teachers do need to be paid more because we do have a recruitment crisis in this country. But I don't think strike action is the most effective way of achieving this.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that teacher salaries in England fell by an average of 11% in real terms between 2010 and 2022. The government says that most state school teachers in England and Wales received a 5% pay rise last year, which came out of pre-existing school budgets. Talks between unions and the government are ongoing. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Well, train drivers from the ASLEF and RMT unions are also striking today, with another scheduled for this Friday.
Well, we're going to go to Hull now. Anna Riley there for us this morning. Anna, what can you tell us? What's the latest there?
Good morning. Yes, there are scheduled to be strikers arriving on the picket line. They've not quite assembled yet this morning, but as you say, it's going to be ASLEF and RMT that are out on strike. Their action is affecting 14 rail companies, and it's going to affect around 80% of services. And for those trains that are running, they're going to be running later in the day and also finishing earlier in the day as well. So as always with these strike days, passengers are being advised to check before they travel. And around the terms and conditions that ASLEF are looking at, they're striking because they want an increase in pay in terms of in line with inflation and the cost of living. The RMT also want a pay rise, but they also have concerns around terms and conditions and job security. They're concerned that a potential introduction of driver-only trains wouldn't be safe, so that's something that they're protesting against. They've been having talks with the government, they've been talking with the RDG and National Rail, but yet haven't come to an agreement. And in terms of the RMT, this strike action could go on until spring this year, and they have a mandate in November to extend the strike action if they deem it necessary. And the train strikes today, we're going to see more strikes for the trains on Friday as well.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you very much indeed. Our head of digital at GB News here, Dan Falvey, joins us now. And what Anna is describing there, Dan, this has been going on for ages, and it doesn't seem to be that we're remotely close to solving this, so that there seems to be a will to solve this.
Yeah, if anything, this all feels like it's gaining momentum. Old strikes, the train drivers have been striking since last summer. New strikes, we've got today school teachers walking out for the first time since 2016. It just feels like every bit of daily life is being disrupted by strike action at the moment.
Yeah, and everybody's forgotten about what's going on at Royal Mail as well. That's sort of faded into the background. These are hovering, and there just does not seem to be the willpower to come to any sort of agreement. The two sides always seem to be so far apart.
Yeah, the problem is there's one crucial issue that there's stalemate on. Both are refusing to budge, and that is over when should these pay rises happen. Everyone's talking about the fact that there should be pay rises, but the government is saying that it needs to be from the next financial year, and that's when they can look at that. A lot of unions are saying, actually, we need to talk about the last 12 months when inflation's been so high. And until they can come up with some sort of compromise, because I think what we've found with all these sort of disputes is there's always got to be compromise. Never is one party the complete winner. Yeah. We're going to keep having this happening again and again and again.
Well, what's different about today is obviously the situation in schools in England and Wales, and lots of families today in the next hour or so turning up at the gate unsure whether or not their children will be going in, and lots of people critical of the government for allowing this to happen. Would a minimum level of service law have prevented a day like today from happening, and how close are we to that being implemented?
So on Monday night, MPs voted through this minimum service level legislation, and what that would mean is that when there's strike action, certain services need to remain open with a certain minimal level so that there's not complete disruption, and that's around trains, it's around healthcare. At the moment, education's not included, but the government have warned that it could be put in there in the future. Now, whether it would work or not, Labour and unions say that this, quite frankly, will do nothing except actually lead to more strike action. They say that what they would end up having to do is walk out on more days in order to make that disruption work. But interesting, we did a poll yesterday of GB News viewers, and we asked them, do they support this minimum service level legislation? And 62% of our viewers said that actually they're supportive of Rishi Sunak's measures and what he's trying to do to stop these strikes causing disruption on every front.
I think it's always useful as well to compare other countries and their rules when it comes to schools. One of the papers this morning saying this wouldn't be happening in Germany. I think it's banned for teachers to strike in Germany, or at least it's extremely closely restricted, tightly legislated against in France as well. And we're told all the time you can't legislate against these things and it impinges the right to strike. What's the truth? What's the reality? I mean, I think teachers are probably better paid on the continent than they are here.
Yeah, I think what we'll find is that people at the moment actually are supportive of teachers striking on the whole. There was an Ipsos poll that was done and that showed that 44% of Britons are supporting teachers striking today versus 35% of people who are opposed. But Isabel, following what we were talking about earlier today, we've also done another GB News poll just out in the last few minutes. We're asking people to get in touch and let us know, do they support teachers' right to strike? So we know what the general population thinks, but we want to know what our GB News viewers think as well.
I don't know if we're able to look at a graphic as well that we have put together from the Office for National Statistics. It's not firing. We'll get that to you later in the programme, but it showed the median salary for public sector workers and their real-term gain or loss since 2012. And teachers were right at the bottom, below nurses, below paramedics, as actually having done pretty badly in all of this. So a lot of people will, have sympathy for them, do an incredibly important job. The question, I suppose, in all of this is whether or not the children should really be the pawns in it and locked out of the classroom after everything that happened during lockdown.
Yeah, we now have a generation of students at secondary school who are going to have almost not any of their secondary school education without having been disrupted in some form via lockdowns, be it strikes. And that's these are important years, and they at every turn seem to be being impacted.
OK, Dan Falvey, good stuff. We look forward to getting the results of your latest poll. Thank you very much indeed.
Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise on this Wednesday, the 1st of February. A 4-year-old girl has died after being attacked by a dog at a house in Milton Keynes. Police say she died at the scene. No arrests have been made. The dog has been put down.
Retail prices are at a record high after a rise in inflation last month. January saw the highest ever inflation rate in the food category. Meanwhile, the clothing and footwear category saw an ease during the New Year's sales.
A which study has found huge differences in the amount of caffeine served by high street coffee shops. For example, a medium cappuccino was found to have anything from 66 to 325 milligrams of caffeine, depending on the brand. Experts warn it could be an issue if you've been advised to limit caffeine intake for medical reasons.
Now, lots of focus tomorrow will be on the Bank of England. They are expected to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row. What will that mean? The base rate is forecast to increase to around 4%.
Now it comes as shop prices hit record highs. Costs are 8% higher than last January, as if you need me to tell you that. With the peak yet to come, that's the depressing thing. This is according to the British Retail Consortium.
Well, our business and economics guru, Liam Halligan, travelled to Kent to hear how higher rates will impact businesses and also the property market.
The Dog at Wingham is a popular pub, hotel and restaurant in deepest Kent.
Mark, great to see you. Liam Halligan, GBNews.
Owner Mark Bridgham works all hours to make this business a success for himself and his 30-strong workforce. But high taxes, rising costs and, above all, soaring energy bills means the Dog is struggling to make a profit.
In a nutshell, our gas and electric was £36,000 per annum, and under the current price cap, it's around £80,000 per annum. And when the price cap ends, it's going to around...
In April?
In April, yeah, like a couple of months away, £120,000 per annum.
For months, Mark hasn't paid himself a wage, despite running a multiple award-winning business. Inflation means his costs, especially for food, are spiralling. And in the current climate, Mark can't risk passing on those price rises to potential customers.
We are offering the best deals we've ever offered in a desperate bid to keep the place at least breaking even.
And 9 successive interest rate rises have squeezed the Dogs guests even more.
Their mortgage going through the roof, their shopping going through the roof, their utilities going through the roof. So they coming out to a lovely place like the Dog is one of the first things that get cut.
For years before the pandemic, the Bank of England kept interest rates below 1%. They then went even lower during COVID lockdown itself. Since then, rates have risen steadily to 3.5% in a bid to tackle inflation. Near the Kent coast in Sandwich, James Halligan, no relation, runs the British Hovercraft Company. A successful manufacturer, he exports 80% of the craft his company makes. But with wages, taxes and interest rates all rising, James says the pressure on his business is simply too much.
It's putting more and more pressure on businesses like ours. Our wages have to go up, and we'll put those alongside the fact that our energy costs have gone up, our interest rates are going up, and we're facing a situation where, as exporters, the confidence in the UK is at a low.
So what of the impact of rising interest rates on the property market? Down the Kent coast in Deal, estate agents say a 2008-style house price collapse won't happen.
I think interest rates will go up a little bit further, but perhaps not as much as we feared.
So you don't see a big house price fall then?
No, I believe more in a correction of value as opposed to a collapse.
The Bank of England is likely to raise interest rates tomorrow, probably to 4%. But inflation is now falling as the economy slows. So an end to these rate rises could soon be on the horizon. Liam Halligan, GB News.
OK, we're going to return to politics now. We are joined by the Shadow Secretary of State for Justice, Steve Reid. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us this morning. Good morning. Look, a lot of people will be reflecting on what's happening across the country with the strikes and what's a first, really, for schools in England and Wales in this current round of them is the teachers walking out. 7 million children at home. Do you think that teachers should be doing this?
Well, nobody wants to see strikes, do they? Nobody wants to see kids not able to go to school, and that includes the teachers themselves. So we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening today? The government knew there was a risk of strikes as far ago as last summer, but they never sat down to talk through with the teaching unions what these issues were. And in fact, it's hard to work out who would have actually been sitting down with the unions, because over the last year there have been 5 different Secretaries of State for Education, including Nadeem Zahawi, who we now know was more focused on taking legal action to silence journalists like you for asking legitimate questions about his tax affairs, rather than sitting down and sorting out these problems in the education system. Okay. So these strikes could have been avoided. You know, if Labour was in power, we would sit down straight away. We'd have done it straight from last summer to make it unnecessary to have strikes by coming to some kind of agreement with the unions.
Although the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party last night pointing out the numbers of union barons who are in the Executive Committee of the Labour Party are very much funding you, so those discussions are probably very different from those of the current government. But on the point of Gillian Keegan, I do think, you know, credit where credit is due. First day in the job, she received a letter from the teaching unions asking for more money, and in the autumn statement, the government coughed up £2.3 billion. They say the next couple of years within schools there will be record funding.
I mean, if you look at what the Tories did in their mini-budget last autumn, they crashed the economy. They stood up and they announced £60 billion of unfunded commitments that caused a run on the pound, forced up interest rates, forced up mortgages, and the item that you just had a moment ago, interest rates in this country higher than in other countries as a direct result of the mistakes made by the government. Now, that came after they'd been in power for over 12 years, and during that period, teachers' pay has been cut in real terms. problems. Now we've got inflation at a near 40-year high, and teachers are being offered a pay rise less than half the rate of inflation, so it's another cut. Now what Gillian Keegan should be doing is sitting down with the trade unions and negotiating a long-term settlement that gets us out of this problem. Fundamental to that would be a government that can actually grow the economy. We know that the Conservatives can't grow the economy. The figures out yesterday from the IMF telling us that our economy will actually grow slower, it will shrink, grow slower than the Russian economy, and that is the subject of major international sanctions. So we've got an incompetent government, unable to run the economy and unable to negotiate with the teaching unions.
Yeah. Steve, there you are. You are the Shadow Secretary for Justice, and a few weeks ago we had a big story on the probation service and whether it was actually fit for purpose. And there's a shocking story which has emerged about serious offenders and the fact that one serious offender on probation, I just can't believe this statistic, is found guilty of murder in this country every single week. Now, it would be easy to kick the probation service, but it sounds to me as if it is a service in collapse, not fit for purpose, not necessarily their own fault. What's your take?
Well, Eamonn, I agree with every word you've just said. It is just shocking that there is one murder on average every week committed by offenders who are out of prison on probation, so supposedly being supervised by the probation services. But in addition to that, there's an average of 2 serious sexual assaults every week as well. So we can see these services are collapsing. So what's gone wrong is, back in 2014, the government forced through a botched part privatisation of these services. Everyone told them don't do it. It was the disaster that was predicted. 4 years later, they did a rushed renationalisation, but they lost an awful lot of experienced probation officers. There are parts of the service that are still carrying 45% vacancies, and they haven't fixed the problem. The information about offenders' behaviour that led to them being convicted and sent to prison, their behaviour inside prison, is not routinely collected and passed on to the remaining probation officers who take decisions about the risk categorisation. And perhaps most shocking of all, there was a whistleblower speaking on the TV news last night, Eamonn, who says that there is direct pressure on probation officers to reduce the risk category of offenders before they're released on probation. So high category prisoners are being sent out as medium or low risk, which means the supervision is reduced. Now, I'm afraid the government must take responsibility for these errors, because report after report after report has told them what is going wrong, and they have chosen to do nothing, and that is putting the public in danger.
So we've got a service here which is a shortage of staff, workloads that they just can't deal with here as well, morale at rock bottom, and their inability to properly supervise dangerous offenders, which leaves all of us, it leaves the public at risk here. It is a shocking situation. The government will say they've got no money to fund it.
Well, the money is there, actually, for once, because these are vacancies. That means they are funded. They just haven't recruited into them. So if I would be the Justice Secretary if Labour wins the next general election, Labour's the party of law and order. We want to protect the public. So what I would do, I would recruit to fill those vacancies. I would change the way that we collect data so that every probation officer would get full information about what was really going on with prisoners, so they could categorise the risk appropriately. And I would end the practice that the Conservatives have tolerated, which is that risk ratings are reduced so that more probation cases can be dealt with more quickly. Public safety must come first, and that must happen before speed. The Tories have just got this absolutely wrong.
Look, we're almost out of time. I've only got time for one last question, and I have to ask you, whilst we've got you, about the comments being made by Michel Barnier, being reported in today's papers. Our viewers and listeners will be well familiar with him as being that tough negotiator during the Brexit negotiations. He's come out and called Sir Keir Starmer a wonderful European who would make a great Prime Minister. Is that the kind of compliment Sir Keir Starmer wants?
I think you should take credit wherever you can get it, to be honest. But there are some serious issues to work out with our European partners. We have to make Brexit work. It clearly isn't at the moment. We need to lower the trade barriers that are really damaging trade with our European partners now. We need to solve the Northern Ireland protocol. And really, we need to get a better security relationship with our European friends to keep our country safe. But, you know, I think Keir would be a great Prime Minister too. And I hope, and, you know, I think the country needs change now. So much is going wrong.
Steve Reed, Shadow Justice Minister, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Your views, as always, welcome. Get in touch with us today. Right, house prices now. Nationwide Building Societies, their monthly house price index report has just come out at 7 o'clock this morning. What does it show? It shows that the average UK house price fell 0.6%, down 0.6% last month. That is the 5th consecutive monthly decline in year-on-year property value. Let's now go to, beside me now, CEO of mortgage startup Will Rice here. Well, is this? So I can never really work out if it's good news or bad news. It's bad news, obviously, if you're selling a house, that the house prices are going down. But generally, by and large, is it okay, that news?
A correction, some would call it?
Depends which side of the table you're on.
Yeah.
But it's very much a continuation of the same trend that we've been seeing since the mini-budget. The most interesting number that I've seen over the last couple of days is actually not this nationwide figure, which tells us that things, house prices are still trending lower. It's the fact that yesterday the Bank of England also disclosed that the number of mortgage approvals was at 35,000 in December, which is the lowest number since the financial crisis.
Yes, so that's down 23% on the previous month. So
yes.
People are finding it much, much harder to get mortgages.
It has halved. So if you're looking at where were we 5 months ago, that number is down from about 65 to 70,000. And then if you break out remortgaging from purchase, remortgages are doing a lot better. So the purchase numbers are down considerably more than 50%.
Do you know, when I read into those figures and we talk about mortgages being granted down, look at the knock-on effect of that. Builders, painters and decorators, solicitors who are involved, and anybody who's involved in the whole market of houses and refurbishing houses and whatever, that's got to have an impact on the economy generally.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that builders are looking at any possible solutions to support sales. You've got to remember Help to Buy finished at the end of last year as well. So what's been an enormous prop for demand for new build housing has also disappeared at the same time that mortgage financing has become harder to come by.
And because, well, what we do know is when house prices do start to go down, people just decide not to sell up, don't they? There's just fewer houses on the market. The stock just isn't there, which means that those people who are trying to buy find themselves in these really crazy races. It's really, really hard. You have to pretty much be a cash buyer nowadays to be able to get the property that you're trying to get. So you have to either live in rental or be in an incredibly secure financial position. And as you say, harder to get a mortgage than ever. It's tough out there.
It is, but I'd say there are also some green shoots, though, that are just beginning to emerge. And I don't think they'll show up in house prices for a while, but there are things that are going to start to turn things around. So we've seen data from a few mortgage lenders over the last week that shows that week by week since this year began, the number of new mortgage approvals has been growing. And last week it was up 20% from the week before. Now, it's still down 40% over the pre-mini budget levels. So this isn't a snapback, but it means that the market is now up about 20% from December levels.
And is that just a seasonal thing? Because I ask you this, a lot of people take their houses off the market over the darkest months and start to think about putting them back on in the new year. Perhaps it's the sort of January pickup.
There's always the post-Christmas house hunting boom. Certainly the numbers that we saw at the start of this year looked as if we might have a bounce back because Rightmove came out and said, this was the busiest post-Christmas period that we've ever had. The sourcing systems that mortgage brokers use to find products, apparently the number of searches for new mortgage products was the highest that it's ever been at the start of the year. But it's only very slowly translating through into actual applications and actual home buyers.
OK. And the average price for a house anywhere in the country, an average UK house price is £258,297. Will Rice, thank you very much indeed. Will is the boss man at Generation Home. Thank you.
We're going to take a break. After that, Paul Coit will be here with all the big transfer news as well as the latest on the Newcastle United story. He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:31, lots still to come on the programme for you this morning. Shocking new research shows that 1 in 10 children have viewed pornography by the time they're 9. Why does this matter? We'll be talking about it at 7:45 and find out what it could mean for young people's brain development.
Yeah, and also how they view relationships. Celebrities like Johnny Vegas, Sue Perkins, Esther Blumenthal reveal they have ADHD. So what is it? We're going to talk about awareness for the condition. It's on the rise, but is it being overdiagnosed? 8:20, talking about that. Right, you can get in touch the usual ways. That's what you do. League Cup final decided, Wembley, February 26th. I've got my ticket booked already.
You can't do that. You just can't.
Do you think that's a jinx?
I think it is a jinx. Can you imagine what happens if I come in tomorrow and you find that Nottingham Forest have scored 3 or 4?
I'll not be in then. I'll not be in.
You won't be.
So Newcastle are through. They beat Southampton last night. Man United play Nottingham Forest, but Man United hold a 3-0 lead.
They do.
They're not going to blow that.
Well, see, the thing is, I'm a Spurs fan. I've seen it happen before, being 3-0 up and lost to Man United. Yeah, it's going to be fine. Of course it is. But it's just one of those things. There was a famous story that this happened when, funny enough, I think it was back in the 80s when Spurs were up against Arsenal and they were in the League Cup semi-final and were up and looked like... And the announcer, it wasn't me, came on and said, oh, just by the way, you can book your tickets now for the final, blah, blah, blah. Then Arsenal came back and scored. It's just one of those things in football... You'll be OK.
But Newcastle, first time in a Wembley final in 47 years.
Yeah, 1976, that was when they lost to Man City. First time in a League Cup final, so the first time they got to a League Cup final. Even longer since they won something, but they are looking like a side now. They really are.
Integral to the Man United side, Christian Eriksen, brutally out for the next 3 months because of that thug Andy Carroll.
Yes.
Terrible, brutal tackle
yes.
on him in the Reading match last week. He got sent off eventually. He'd fouled so many people. But Christian Eriksen would be a big loss.
He is going to be a big loss. But this is what Manchester United have done very well yesterday, and that's dipped into the transfer market. That's a phrase, I think, dipping into the transfer market, because the transfer window closed 11 o'clock last night. Marcel Sabitzer now plays for Bayern Munich. It looks like he's coming to the end of his time at Bayern Munich, but they need a midfielder. He's not Christian Eriksen, because Christian Eriksen's been fantastic for United and made a huge difference. So he's going to come in the meantime until Christian Eriksen's fit again.
Is he a loan signing?
Yeah, it's a loan signing, yeah. And there's no obligation to buy, so he's just coming in, fill the boots for a little while until Eriksen's back. But that could be 2 or 3 months. Yeah, so it could be some time.
Well, it could be some time, but for the guy who's coming on loan, that could be a League Cup final, an FA Cup final. Well, maybe the league is a bit much to...
Are you over?
Maybe we'll settle for those two in the top four finish. Sean Dyche, OK, Everton, he's the new boss. They didn't sign someone, and you thought they needed some players.
They needed strikers. They needed a striker. They need someone to put the ball in the back of the net. But the thing is, they didn't get anybody, which is more reason now we're going to see Everton fans protesting even more. Sean Dyche is on a hiding to nothing. It's going to be the most difficult job in football, although... There's still 3 points, which is separating 7 clubs at the bottom of the league.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of Everton fans that are like, it's over, we're down, we're done for. Not necessarily. They did try and get a striker. They tried Ismail Sarr from Watford. He wasn't going. Olivier Giroud, they tried to get him on loan as well from AC Milan. He didn't come, so it was a last-minute desperation, but they ended up with no one. So it's just down to them. So it's just whether Sean Dyche can do it with the players and get them together and see if we can get a bit of fight out of them.
Well, no better man to do it. Paul, thank you very much indeed. See you in the morning, hopefully with the news of the lineup for the Carabao Cup final.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens. Half-time, 2-0 down. I'll get a text. I'm not in tomorrow. Amen. We'll see.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Good having you.
We're going to take a really quick break. After that, David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire will be back with a lively review of your papers. See you in a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints, over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yeah, we go back to the newspapers, flicking through them for us this morning, and for you, the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Miller, and the former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. David, Brexit, this is the Times. They're saying that Brexit emboldened Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine. Why?
Well, this is Guy Verhofstadt, who was Prime Minister of Belgium for a decade and is a leading light in the EU. And I just wanted to pull this out because, you know, the danger is that this Brexit stuff, and I, by the way, was no big fan of Brexit.
Even though you have, throughout your career, been a Eurosceptic, we should
yes,
point
of course.
out. Yeah.
And that's my point, you see, that, I mean, I love that bumper sticker in America which said, a shame one of them's got to win, you know, because at the end of the day, I'm a Eurosceptic, and I didn't think Brexit was going to work because it was being put forward in a very simplistic way. And now we have this nonsense where a very senior figure in the EU is saying that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine if Britain hadn't left the EU. But he invaded Crimea when Britain was
part of the EU.
And he is one of those people who wanted to have a European army separate from NATO because his obsession with European integration knows no bounds. And I just think it's important for people to realise, because sometimes, you know, I listen and grind my teeth. If I had any teeth left, I grind them so much.
Lovely.
That, you know, that they're saying that, oh, well, if the EU would have done this, you would have done that. The EU would not have done any of those things that were particularly sensible. And I think it's good that the Times are pointing out that, you know, a crazy like Verhofstadt is a very significant figure in the EU. And you know, do you believe, Eamonn, or anyone here believe that if that Putin would not have invaded Ukraine if it hadn't been for Brexit? It's nonsense.
It's impossible, isn't it?
I mean, there are lots of cases we've made against
Brexit.
Like we don't have to say they wouldn't have invaded Ukraine.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course, it's absolute nonsense. But we do, I mean, on the other hand, you know, in the Daily Mail, you have Daniel Johnson writing that there's nothing wrong with Brexit. It's all the EU's fault. And you read it through and there's not one fact in there. There's not one thing that says why Brexit is a good thing. So, of course, this is absolute rubbish.
And this is a nutty Johnson who isn't related to
Daniel Johnson, son of Paul, as he points out. I mean, of course, he's a nepo baby, as we say. But actually, it's quite incredible that you know, polarising on both sides. They're all mad.
Well, the Mail is polarising. Page 15, Scarlett.
God. So Sarah Vine writes, you know, the nation is now split between silent strivers and noisy strikers.
Silent strivers.
Silent strivers.
Yes, OK.
Because people who go to work and don't talk, you know, the so-called silent majority. But what makes me so angry, and she's been going on and on about teachers for some time, is that during the pandemic, she wrote about how brilliant teachers were and how she realised just what a job they did when she started educating her children at home and trying to do it. And now she turns around, and if you listen to the teachers, it's not just about money, it's actually about working conditions, it's actually about respect, it's about the fact that this government hasn't even tried to negotiate with them. I mean, you have Gillian Keegan, who on Friday, with the strikes coming up, tweets from, Instagram, from her hairdresser saying how wonderful it is. You know, let's take this...
She met with these teaching unions on Monday, to be fair.
Once. I mean, and she said you don't have to go on strike to get my attention. And you think, what do they have to do? But how do you get a pay rise? And also, how do you get a pay rise that's actually paid for? I mean, that's the problem, is the schools say, we can't afford this anyway. I mean, it is terrible. But for Sarah Vine not to say, you know, actually, teachers do a really, really good job and we should listen to them.
I want to pick up on that point, because is it not possible to really value what teachers do and say there is a societal question about how much we value them, but also to say, as Catherine Burblesing, an outspoken head teacher who was also the previous social mobility czar, came out and said, now is not the time to have this discussion about pay. Yes, we need to talk about how society values teachers, but we can't give them inflation-busting pay rises because we can't afford to pay for it. Look at the state of the finances. Look at what the IMF said yesterday. It's cloud cuckoo land.
OK, and so at the moment, I mean, the reality is that many teachers are leaving within their first year of teaching. We're spending a fortune training teachers, right? And a third of them leave within the first 5 years. So actually, it's just like the nurses. If we don't do something to keep them, we are going to lose them.
OK. University lecturers and staff within universities on strike today. Yeah. And we're going to talk about the University of Greenwich, David.
Yes. Well, they've added a trigger warning for sexist Jane Austen. They're warning that Northanger Abbey, written in 1817, features gender stereotypes and toxic relationships.
Well, of course it does.
Exactly.
I mean, that was what
Who would read
was
it
like then. Women didn't have the vote. The way you married was the most important way to secure your security. It doesn't mean it's not a good novel. This is so irritating. You can't go back over history and rewrite quality literature because it offends modern sensibilities.
I mean, passing lightly over the fact that I'm pretty unaware of the University of Greenwich, but no doubt it exists and no doubt it contains distinguished people. But
I think it certainly does. Actually, let's not go for the University of Greenwich. Let's actually talk about the problem of trigger warnings.
But having, are we really paying people public money to denounce Jane Austen, or rather think students are so sensitive they need a warning about the dangers of reading Jane Austen? It's a joke.
My dad has an allergic reaction when he comes anywhere near a Jane Austen novel. He can't stand them. My mum and I both adore them.
Well, I tell you, I had the most awful day on Sunday. I was in my invalid recliner chair, and suddenly the TV channel, something like Where Eagles Dare or something, finished, and up came another film, and it was Emma. Jane Austen novel.
With Gwyneth Paltrow.
With Gwyneth Paltrow. And I couldn't find the TV control.
To turn it off. You're like, get this filth off.
I have never seen a bigger pile of junk. And I mean...
I thought you were going to say something else.
Oh, man, honestly, it was paining me to watch this crud. And
literature. You think... Well, it's probably just Hollywood ruining it.
Well, it wasn't bad. I think Jane Austen is wonderful, right? And if you read something like Possession, it is so funny, so witty, and absolutely goes for the class consciousness. And I think Jane Austen is a brilliant writer.
You can have my share.
So you should go to the University of Greenwich and take over from this. I think the problem is students had been warned about.
I mean, there is. I think there's trigger warnings when things are going to happen and you need to warn them. But, I mean, you just say all Jane Austen novels are, as you say, I mean, of course they're deeply sexist. I mean, it wasn't that the best way is to marry. It's the only way. I mean, poor Jane, of course, didn't marry. And so she knew what it was like, you know, living sort of with her brother.
I would like to go down to the University of Greenwich today with some redundancy notices.
Oh, come on. Come on. It's you know, it's as much
But
the students
I come
as
out
the
in a warm,
staff.
fuzzy feeling when I think about Jane Austen. I get lost in a Jane Austen novel, and just the way she could really, you know, the way she could describe.
I had to study
I fell in love with Darcy when I was 16.
Gosh, yeah.
Honestly.
She's a woman's author, isn't she?
No.
I
mean, I just think if you have you read her?
I had the misfortune
not a fan.
to study Mansfield Park for my A-levels as well, and that's another period of my life I'll never get back. But I mean, this...
No, I have to say, I am yet to find many men.
It's being so cheerful that keeps him going.
But it is a social study. I mean, Isabel's absolutely right. It's about what life was like at that time if you were a woman, right? And it was incredibly tough.
If you were poor. You ended up with a rubbish husband. Can you imagine? How awful.
Terrible. Awful. Absolutely terrible.
Yes. Let's talk about this dog attack in Milton Keynes. This 4-year-old girl mauled to death.
Well, I tell you that, first of all, we are doggy people, but it doesn't mean we have an indiscriminate, favourable view of all dogs. It's on the increase, that dog attacks. And I mean, a 4-year-old child, I mean, I feel particularly... bad about this. It's awful when a 4-year-old child loses its life. But, you know, I have a 4-year-old, well, she's just become 5 weekend before last, granddaughter. Yeah. And, you know, they come and stay with us down in Dorset. And the other day, fortunately, there's only the gardeners were there. This husky, which has escaped from some alleged training centre for huskies that the National Trust keeps on their land. No, but seriously, it came shooting through 2 or 3 fences, and this 15-stone... tough gardener said, I really thought he was going to have a go at me.
Gosh,
and, you know,
David.
but the fright, you know, what worries me is, you know, with 3 grandchildren under the age of 5, wandering around in a garden, you think they're safe. And you know, somebody was walking past our property the other day with a huge boxer dog off the lead. They're supposed to have it on the lead. And when I told him he should have it on the lead, he started getting really mouthy. So I said, don't push your luck, mate, because it's not a question of the police. You could actually sue somebody for get an injunction for if that animal regularly came. But I think we're taking our love of dogs to an unreasonable degree.
I struggle to think of a worse way to die, I must say, than being
terrible.
Ghastly. I mean, absolutely appalling.
Thanks, guys. We're out of time there. Let us know your views on this. The guys will be back in about 40 minutes' time with more stories from the papers.
A really serious issue now, not necessarily breakfast sort of topic, but really important to get into, because we're talking now about the consumption of pornography and how widespread it is becoming amongst children. This is according to new findings by the Children's Commissioner for England.
The alarming report claims 1 in 10 children, 10%, have viewed explicit adult content by the age of 9, with a worrying 80% of young adults having been exposed to violent sexual imagery.
Well, experts are now suggesting it is important to start the conversation around consent sooner rather than later. So let's get into this topic with addiction therapist Dr. Paula Hall. Good morning to you, Doctor. Thanks for joining us. I think the most shocking statistic, apart from the fact that such young children are being exposed to something that is not clearly for children, is that 40% of young people, when asked, said that they now thought girls expected violence during sexual encounters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, this leads into the sort of conversations about the online safety bill. I mean, that's why it is so important for us to go ahead and actually get this bill through Parliament, because we need to have some ways of doing whatever we can to ensure that young people don't find this content. Some people enjoy it, some adults enjoy it, it's their recreational pleasure, and I don't think we should be interfering with that. But we do need to do something to ensure that it is not accessible by young people, or do as much as we possibly can. We'll never block it completely, unfortunately.
Paula, I don't know. I've been using Twitter for 11 years or so, and I'm not aware of porn on Twitter. I'm not aware what you would have to do to search for it, or I mean, explain to me. Do they deliberately seek this out? I've read some reports where they come across it or it accidentally... Well, it's never accidentally happened to me on Twitter.
That's probably because you don't spend enough time in the playground, Eamonn. I mean, if you were in the playground and you were hearing all sorts of words from the older children coming up and you wonder what it means and you know it's a bit naughty and you're probably thinking, I'm not going to go home and ask Mum what that means. I just get a sense that wouldn't be the right thing to do. Then chances are you're going to try and look it up online. And that's where these things come up. And so often it comes from a relatively innocent search, or it comes up from actually a young person wanting more education. And I think that's the other thing that's so important to talk about, or to make sure we keep having the conversation around, is the importance of education. If the only way that young people can learn about sex is through Googling, through Twitter, through being online, then we are going to continue to have these one-sided messages.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, that conversation around, you know, relationships, because so much of pornography is warped. It's not a normal relationship. It's incest. It's having sex illicitly with a babysitter. It's all sort of scenarios that are not healthy relationships. And if a young boy, 9, 10, 11, God forbid, grows up seeing that on a daily basis, and in order to get stimulated wants more and more graphic, more and more abnormal things, what is that doing to their brain and their ability to have normal relationships? And what is that doing to young women when they go into relationships with those boys?
As to what's expected of them.
It is really important that we do include girls in this conversation, because girls are watching pornography as well. So it is boys and girls that are learning from these messages.
I'd love to know the stats on that, of course, because I don't buy into that women are watching porn as much as men. I genuinely don't believe that.
Yeah, I think there is some variation, but it's also changing along the generations. One of the problems we really have in terms of research around this topic is that it is very hard to research the viewing habits of people under the age of 18, because we start hitting all sorts of legal issues, but that's kind of another point, really. But sex can be recreational, sex can be fun, sex can be all sorts of different things. And for a lot of people, of course, sex is also a very important part of their relationship, particularly if you are in a relationship, if you choose to be in a relationship. But there are other forms of sexuality, and I think one of the things that I find really frustrating is that it is so easy to become polarised in this debate and say young people see pornography that they shouldn't, therefore porn is bad. And that is one of the things that has got in the way of us getting this online safety bill through, because there are a lot of people who really worry about us legalising what adults are allowed to watch.
Dr. Hall, we've just got 15 seconds. We've just got 15 seconds left, Dr. Hall. And as an addiction therapist, you would like to direct people towards pivotalrecovery.org. What do they do?
Absolutely. So that's the other consequence that so often happens from pornography, and we know that it's more likely to happen if you view at a young age, is actually finding that your pornography use becomes addictive or compulsive. So it's a service, it's a community interest company that provides low-cost services for people that become addicted, but also critically, we want to be involved in education. There are lots of different forms of sex out there. We need to teach young people about it.
Got to leave it there, Dr. Hall. Thank you very much indeed. That's pivotalrecovery.org if you or someone you know seems to have an addiction towards pornography.
Let us know your thoughts on all of the topics covered. We're going to take a break. After that, we are going to be outside a school. This is because teachers in England and Wales are walking out for the first time. We'll have all the details for you after this short break.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us. on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Millions of children will miss school on this, the UK's biggest day of strikes for over 10 years.
Good morning, it's 8:01. It's Wednesday, the 1st of February. Thank you very much for your company this morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news on this first day of the month. Thousands of state schools in England and Wales will be closed today as teachers begin their biggest strike action in 30 years.
It's part of the biggest day of walkouts since 2011, with train drivers, border force officials and university staff also taking part. Downing Street's warned the public to expect significant disruption.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are facing rebellion over their economic plans as senior Tories blame them for dire forecasts. It comes as the Bank of England is predicted to raise interest rates to a new 15-year high tomorrow.
And from Sue Perkins to Heston Blumenthal to Johnny Vegas, as more celebrities speak out about their ADHD diagnosis, we'll ask why there's been such a rise in the condition and how to spot the signs.
So it is strikes today, and it's education that leads the news. What are folks saying about
well, look,
strikes?
lots of you getting in touch on this morning. Trevor saying, I don't think teachers are right to be striking. Kids have suffered enough. In the past 3 years, their education comes first. End of.
Poppy says, it's ironic if a child doesn't come into school, the parents can be fined. Maybe teachers should be fined too. Lead by example. Attendance is paramount to learning.
Robert says, can't believe so many people are against striking given the past year of price hikes. Yes, it's difficult as a parent to make other arrangements, but enough is enough.
So how close are we to any settlements in these strikes? We're going to be asking that to a government minister after 9 o'clock this morning. So 7 million children will miss lessons today. as teachers join the biggest day of industrial action in over a decade.
85% of English and Welsh state schools will be closed, with the teaching union accusing the government of squandering the opportunity to avert industrial action after talks collapsed on Monday.
Well, they join teachers in Scotland, train drivers, civil servants and border force staff who are also striking today, with 500,000 people in total walking out.
Well, let's go now to our reporter, Jack Carson. He's outside a school in Edgbaston in Birmingham. And look, I'm really interested to see what's happening on the school gate there, Jack, because, of course, any parent will tell you they have been told they will not know until they get to the morning of whether or not their particular teacher will be striking or not, and whether or not children will be going into school. What is happening where you are?
Well, that's exactly the case. It is literally a case-by-case basis, school-by-school basis. Lots of schools not knowing till this morning, as we turn into this 8 o'clock hour, whether they're going to be able to open or not, because of course teachers don't have to tell their school if they are going to be striking or not. I've seen a few teachers arrive here this morning. The school here seems to be open at least. Some parents already bringing their child into an early morning breakfast club. But of course, what classes can go ahead? A lot of classes today are going to have to be grouped together because, of course, it's not going to be the staff. We know that teaching assistants are also having to come in and help run those classes, as well as some volunteers. The government's saying that volunteers could go into schools to help look after children, help teach children, help provide and fill in those gaps that a lot of teachers striking today are going to cause. We know there's around 200,000 teachers that the NEU say are going to be striking today. That's on top of the 127,000 members who originally voted for industrial action. In the past kind of couple of weeks, they say around 40,000 extra members have joined their union. We know negotiations to try and stop these strikes were going on up until late yesterday. The Schools Minister, Nick Gibbs, saying the government was having very constructive discussions on the teacher strikes and has already held several meetings within the department. He says we're still negotiating and discussing issues of pay, of workload and of other issues that are of concerns to teachers. He says it's disappointing that the National Education Union has decided to go ahead with the strike and with all the disruption it causes to children's education. It's not the case that every single teacher in the country is going on strike. A lot of them feel, as some of the viewers you read out there mentioned, that it's a bit unfair after the pandemic to be not letting children have their full education now that schools are once again back. But for teachers, it's about three kind of real important things that I've seen from a lot of teachers, heard from a lot of teachers, particularly on social media, saying it's about one, underfunded schools, the squeeze on the school day and hours, and teacher workload. The government has said it's committed to an extra £2 billion of spending for schools, but teachers saying that they have to work in things like holidays and what other jobs you have to work in your holidays in order to do your job. So teachers are on strike today. It's the first of 7 strike days with some regional and national strikes. Here in Birmingham specifically, around lunchtime, we're going to have a big rally of a lot of teachers, a lot of trade union members. Of course, as you mentioned, there's a lot of other public service industry workers going on strike today, including civil servants, train strikes again as well. So we're going to have a big rally in Birmingham today. But here on the ground, here at this school specifically seems to be open. But for parents up and down the country, the advice is to check with your school this morning whether you should take your child or whether they'll be able to get any lessons.
See if you can grab us a teacher. They'll probably all be inside now, or certainly some parents at drop-off, and would love to hear what they're saying in Edgbaston this morning. Jack, for now, we say thank you very much and see you a little bit later on.
Well, as well as school staff at 150 universities across the UK are on strike today. Yep. The University and College Union was offered an improved pay deal last week. It was worth between 5 and 8%. That was rejected. Our national reporter, Theo Chikomba even, has the story.
18 strike days organised by higher education staff members. Scenes like this will be seen at UK universities as they've rejected a number of pay rise offers from their Employers Association.
I have spent, and other board members have spent, as much time as we can over the last couple of months, and specifically a lot of the last few weeks, talking to as many institutions as we can. There is no, I don't want to use the Jacinda Ardern phrase, there's nothing left in the tank. There is really no more permission we can get. Many institutions are worried at the level of the uplift we've offered at the moment, so I can't see where we go from here. There are dispute meetings which which are scheduled should we need them, and there's a process in place to try and resolve this.
Some staff are striking over pay and conditions, others over pensions. Some are striking over both. There are also demands to end the use of zero-hour and temporary contracts.
The University and College Union, which represents around 130,000 staff across higher education, say the latest offer doesn't go far enough. They say it's still way below inflation and doesn't make up for the years of pay degradation they've had in the sector.
When 70,000 staff took part in strike action in November 2022, the UCEA said there was little disruption, and the Universities UK, which represents 140 institutions, said some universities extended coursework deadlines and rescheduled teachings. But what about this time round?
We're continuing with that and obviously monitoring. Part of the difficulty, as you know, is that we won't necessarily know from staff that they're taking action. Therefore, the disruption to students on the day is inconvenient to them, but and we're reaching out to staff to ask whether they can advise us whether they're taking action, but they don't have to tell us, and therefore we're monitoring very closely to make sure that students aren't disadvantaged and inconvenienced too much.
And that's exactly what some students are concerned about.
You know, we pay for our tuition, and the fact that we don't get to have this sort of time that we look forward to having, again, it delays us from our learning and delays us from doing well. I totally get the striking. I understand. See, there's an understanding there to why that's happening. But personally, again, I said before, we pay for these things, and obviously striking means that we are not getting our money's worth.
While 18 strike days are set to take place, the University and College Union say they will reballot staff at all 150 universities if there's no resolution, meaning there could be further disruption for students and staff. Theo Chkomba, GB News.
Well, we can get the latest now on the civil service and on border force strikes. Let's go live to St Pancras International Station with our political reporter Olivia Utley. And of course, you're there, Olivia, because Eurostar comes into St Pancras and we're seeing the army manning the desks, doing passport control today.
Yes, well, we're expecting a picket line to be forming here later this morning, where up to 100,000 civil servants across 124 different government bodies are expected to walk out today. The argument is over pay and working conditions and the threat from the government of sackings coming soon, redundancies being made soon. Now, civil servants are demanding, for the PCS union, are demanding a 10% pay increase, which is lower than we're seeing from nurses, train drivers and some of the other striking public bodies. But the government is maintaining the line that if you replicated that 10% pay increase across those 100,000 striking civil servants, it would cost £2.4 billion, a figure which they say is just completely impossible at these times. The PCS argues that that figure is an overestimate and that the 2% that they've been offered just isn't good enough. And in the meantime, we're seeing, as you say, Isabel, the army having to stand in and government departments being told that they will have to fork out up to £4,000 per week per soldier covering the shifts which are not being done by these 100,000 civil servants. We are also expecting to see another wave of strikes from fast-stream civil servants who are part of the FDA union, who are being balloted next week, and it's looking very much as though they're going to reach a threshold too. So it really does feel this morning as though the administration of the country is really grinding to a halt.
Yeah, and I just want to point to a graphic, and I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot, but we've got this graphic drawn up about, this is from the Office for National Statistics, about public sector pay, and it is interesting to compare the different sectors, and I know you're focusing there on the Home Office, but according to this graph, the real-term pay rises since 2011, you can see train drivers right at the top there, doing the best out of all of this, but it's the teachers at the bottom. Does that match public sympathy, do you think, Olivia? And I'm aware you can't see the graphic where you are, but you get the idea.
Yes, definitely. We are seeing huge public support for the teachers. it was hoped that, from the government's perspective, that parents who are sick and tired of the school closures during lockdown would sympathise with them and would want to take a hard line against the teachers. But that isn't what we're seeing at all. The parents who the government has been speaking to aren't happy at all with the way the government has handled these strikes. And that is very bad news, because I was talking to an MP this morning who was saying that so far, sympathy for the issues for the government from these strikes, the political fallout for the strikes, actually hasn't been as bad as you might expect. But today, with the teachers' strikes starting, we're certainly beginning to see that change. And of course, it's Rishi Sunak's 100th day in office. The spotlight is on him today, and it's not looking particularly good.
Okay.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you very much. Meanwhile, the Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row tomorrow. The base rate forecast to rise to 4%.
Yeah, well, all of this comes as shop prices are hitting record highs. Costs are now 8% higher than last January. You don't need us to tell you that. But the bad news is the British Retail Consortium say the peak is yet to come.
Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, travelled to Kent to hear how higher rates will impact companies and the property market.
The Dog at Wingham is a popular pub, hotel and restaurant in deepest Kent.
Mark, great to see you. Liam Halligan, GBNews.
Owner Mark Bridgham works all hours to make this business a success for himself and his 30-strong workforce. But high taxes, rising costs and, above all, soaring energy bills means the Dog is struggling to make a profit.
In a nutshell, our gas and electric was £36,000 per annum. And under the current price cap, it's around £80,000 per annum. And when the price cap ends, it's going to around...
In April?
In April, yeah, like a couple of months away, £120,000 per annum.
For months, Mark hasn't paid himself a wage, despite running a multiple award-winning business. Inflation means his costs, especially for food, are spiralling. And in the current climate, Mark can't risk passing on those price rises to potential customers.
We are offering the best deals we've ever offered in a desperate bid to keep the place at least breaking even.
And 9 successive interest rate rises have squeezed the Dog's guests even more.
Their mortgage going through the roof, their shopping going through the roof, their utilities going through the roof. So they coming out to a lovely place like the Dog is one of the first things that get cut.
For years before the pandemic, the Bank of England kept interest rates below 1%. They then went even lower during COVID lockdown itself. Since then, rates have risen steadily to 3.5% in a bid to tackle inflation. Near the Kent coast in Sandwich, James Halligan, no relation, runs the British Hovercraft Company. A successful manufacturer, he exports 80% of the craft his company makes. But with wages, taxes and interest rates all rising, James says the pressure on his business is simply too much.
It's putting more and more pressure on businesses like ours. Our wages have to go up, and we'll put those alongside the fact that our energy costs have gone up, our interest rates are going up, and we're facing a situation where, as exporters, the confidence in the UK is at a low.
So what of the impact of rising interest rates on the property market? Down the Kent coast in Deal, estate agents say a 2008-style house price collapse won't happen.
I think interest rates will go up a little bit further, but perhaps not as much as we feared.
So you don't see a big house price fall then?
No, I believe more in a correction of value as opposed to a collapse.
The Bank of England is likely to raise interest rates tomorrow, probably to 4%. But inflation is now falling as the economy slows. So an end to these rate rises could soon be on the horizon. Liam Halligan, GB News.
Time 17 minutes past 8. We bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. A man has died after he was stabbed in a city centre park in Bristol. The victim in his 30s was found injured in Castle Park yesterday afternoon. He was taken to hospital where he later passed away. The start of 2023 has seen a slowing of the annual house price growth, says Nationwide Building Society. It fell from 2.8% in December to 1.1% last month. A Which study has found huge differences in the amount of caffeine served by high street coffee shops. For example, a medium cappuccino was found to have anything from 66 to 325 milligrams of caffeine, depending on the brand. We will go to the break. After that, we're going to be talking about the condition ADHD. What is it? And is it being overdiagnosed after this?
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already depressed.
Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2 is the time. We've got lots more for you.
We have relationships between prison staff and inmates.
Shouldn't be allowed.
Well, they've gone up by
Well, that's
30%.
ridiculous.
There's obviously not a lot to do in prison. And as the government looks to crack down on what is termed inappropriate behaviour, we're going to be speaking to a retired prison governor at 8:45 to get her take.
Oh, she's fascinating. She ran one of the toughest gentlemen's prisons in the country, didn't she? We've spoken to her once on the programme before. She's amazing. Stay tuned for that.
That's Tony Christie.
Oh, yeah.
And he's going to show us the way to Amarillo. And he's also going to talk, this is incredible, because he's been diagnosed with dementia. He's still performing, We're going to find out how it's affecting them.
Well, music, huge help for people with dementia, and he has a positive take on it all.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So many people living with it, so he'll give you an uplifting perspective, I'm sure. So stay tuned for that around 45 minutes' time.
OK, your views, your stories to tell us. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, do you have ADHD? Do you think you might have ADHD? Let us know. The number of people being diagnosed with it has significantly risen. It's around 3.5 million in the UK today, and that includes an increase in adults with the condition. Celebrities like Hester Blumenthal, Sue Perkins and Johnny Vegas all having spoken out about their experiences.
But what is it, and what is the reason for the rise in diagnosis? What's it like to live with ADHD or someone with it? Kirsty Nicole Hadley was diagnosed with the disorder at 48 years old. She's in the studio here. And we can also talk to former GP and health journalist Dr. Claire Bailey. And Doc, if we could start with you, could you just sum up to people, what is it? What is it?
So ADHD is often seen as children bouncing off the wall. The diagnosis was made with mainly looking at boys. And one of the challenges is that these children are actually understimulated rather than overstimulated. So they seek things that are intense. They are hyperactive, inclined to be hyperactive, but not everybody is. They're impulsive. They can be disorganized. They lose things. But it can have there's obviously a spectrum, but it can have quite a sort of significant impact on people's lives.
Thank you very much for explaining all of that. Let's talk to Kirsty, who, as we said in the introduction, got diagnosed at the age of 48. First of all, you don't look like you could have been 48 any time recently. You're a lot younger than that. But, does that resonate with you? Were there sort of symptoms that you kind of recognised in your life? I mean, what made you go and get assessed?
Well, first of all, my 11-year-old was diagnosed before me, so I think that's happening quite a lot. Parents are suddenly realising that they have ADHD after their children have been diagnosed. And regards the overdiagnosis of ADHD, I would sort of argue
that... You think it is an overdiagnosis?
No, I don't think it is. I think that what we're seeing is actually a correction, because for decades people have gone undiagnosed, particularly women, because, as the doctor said, historically ADHD was seen as a young, white, heterosexual boy's condition. So anybody that fell out of that group, so anyone that wasn't white, anyone that wasn't heterosexual, and anyone that wasn't a boy would have just gone undiagnosed. And I think also ADHD can be genetic or triggered by trauma. So I'm not surprised that in a post-COVID cost of living crisis world that more people are suddenly realising that they're not coping where they were before, and that might be down to ADHD. And I think with the kids particularly, I think that we will find there's a direct correlation between when the new school curriculum was put into effect, which was 2014, I believe, and the sharp increase of child mental health cases that we've seen since then. My child can't go to school full-time. They go in 2 or 3 days a week. So, hi, Sonny. But yeah, there are hundreds of thousands of children across the UK currently that can't go to school because they're too traumatised. And most of those kids do have ADHD.
Let's go back to Dr. Bailey on this. What about treatment or dealing with it, or advising, parents? Is this medication? Is there certain patterns of behaviour that we've got to adhere to? Tell us how it's dealt with.
So initially, one of the problems is that it isn't diagnosed, and it's very commonly missed, particularly in girls. Initially, you would be looking at an assessment with possibly via your GP, being referred. And the first thing to do is to be involving them with a parenting support. because these children are much more, they're more difficult to raise. They're more challenging. Life is more difficult for them. They tend to get a lot of negative responses from people. You know, at school, they're the ones that the teachers often find kind of really quite annoying. They jump up, you know, they're in your face, and they're impulsive. So it's about, you know, parents it's important to, you know, upskill in a way. They need extra super parenting skills because these children are more difficult to raise. And the more one of the problems is that they get so much negative feedback that, you know, it affects their self-esteem and, you know, and in that sense of being traumatized.
Claire, when those children become adults, and we had a whole list of people there in the public eye who have said, I have ADHD, and probably makes them the people they are. So what happens to it? Do you cope with it? Do you grow out of it? You know, a hyperactive child, do they stay a hyperactive adult?
Not necessarily. A proportion of these children do you know, go on into adulthood, but as it's a sort of slow immaturity. The brain just hasn't quite caught up, and if in adulthood, it can affect people's work. It can affect their ability to function with relationships. So, you know, in that context, you know, medication can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
And it helps people focus, it helps people manage their life much better. And then they're able to, you know, they may not stay on the medication, they may use it strategically just to start a project. It's one of the things they struggle to get going.
Well,
but once they get going, they can focus really well.
I hope this isn't a terribly ignorant thing to say, but I, as a non-ADHD sufferer, have always actually looked at people with ADHD with an element of kind of jealousy, because people that I've met in my life who've had it haven't needed sleep, have had bags of energy. And I have to say, I've met a lot of incredibly successful people who would say they are disruptors, that they've gone on to be at the top of their game because they've got bags of energy and enthusiasm. It's not necessarily a bad diagnosis, would you say?
What you've just said is music to my ears, because this is exactly the message that we need to be getting out to the kids. Because when we are talking about our ADHD and autistic kids as disruptive and difficult to deal with, that is not helpful. Like, they are not disruptive and they are not difficult. It's neurotypical society that is not understanding these children. And I think that another thing, going back to the, you know, this new spike in diagnosis, is that traditional medicine would have only diagnosed us depending on how problematic we were for society, i.e. schools and in the workplace. But now we're able to say neurotypical society is problematic for us, actually.
I can understand that. Christie, what would it be like? Because you said you subsequently found out that you had it because your child was diagnosed. What do you like to live with? What we have to be aware of? I mean, if I was living with you, what would I have to be aware to accommodate? What would day-to-day life be like?
It's like, how honest can I be on live television?
Honest as you like.
Chaotic, erratic, quite severe mood swings, I would say.
But it's not like... No, I'm not going to say
Don't say
You're going to say that's a female thing, aren't you?
But then... Has that been problematic for you in relationships, say, for us?
Yeah, for sure. I think that I was difficult to live with for myself and for a lot of people around me. Yeah, ADHD doesn't affect just the person; it affects everybody that the person touches. You know.
So how do you deal with you?
So I now I take medication now.
Is that Ritalin?
So I take a medication called Elvance, which is a stimulant, and then I also take another medication called sertraline, which is for anxiety, because ADHD comes with a heightened level of anxiety. And I think that before I took medication, I was very, like I said, chaotic, erratic. You know, I would never know if I was going to have bags of energy one day or no energy, because what you were describing is the upside of it.
Okay.
Isabel, but the downside is what you don't see. It's when we're just crashed out at home. So my medication has made me more consistent. It's made me more level, calmer. Because when you think of a stimulant, you think it's going to make you like crazy, don't you?
And,
it's the opposite.
And do you look, when people like Johnny Vegas or Sue Perkins or Heston Blumenthal say, look, I have this, does that give you hope? Is that more towards an acceptance of what you have?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's brilliant. Again, like more important for the children, for the next generation, so that they can see that there's nothing wrong with them. They are not broken. It's the systems. It's neurotypical society that's broken. They are perfect just as they are, actually. So when people like Johnny Vegas and Sue Perkins and Heston come out, and it is like a coming out, when they're public about their diagnosis, it's a wholly positive thing. We talk about it all the time in our house. My child is like, Mum, cringe, you're talking about ADHD again, because it's so normal for us.
Well, thank you, Kirsty, for being so honest. I just want to get a final thought from Dr. Claire whilst she's on the line to us, because we've been talking a lot about caffeine, and obviously Kirsty there was talking about stimulants and the impact of those. I don't know if you've seen the story today, which is talking about the huge variation in the amount of caffeine in coffee that's served on the high street. Can I just get your take on what kind of impact that has on people with ADHD or ordinary people to have these kinds of stimulants and their impact on attention spans as well?
So, one of the things that the misconceptions is that people with ADHD are overstimulated, and then they imagine that with the once they have caffeine, they're going to be bouncing off the walls. And actually, it's quite the opposite way around. That children or people with ADHD seek stimulus because they're actually understimulated. So a coffee or two is actually going to help them focus, just like you would if you've had a late night, exhausted, and you get up in the morning and have a good strong cup of coffee. So it's actually kind of counterintuitive from that point of view. A couple of cups of coffee is not going to do any harm, and it helps them focus.
Fabulous. Dr. Claire Bailey, Kirsty Nicole Hadley, thank you both indeed for talking to us this morning.
Really good. And keep the comments coming in, if this is in your life and how you deal with it. And is it a curse or a blessing? Right, it's 25 to 9. Stay with us because we'll take a break. And after that, we're going to go through the newspapers with David Miller and Scarlett Maguire.
Thank you.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236 and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, if you could hear what goes on in the advert break.
You could see us now.
But David, actually, we joke. Serious, we'd go through the papers, I should say, and we welcome back Scarlett Maguire and David Mellett for the final time. David, you want to start with this really serious story in The Telegraph, looking at Canada and drugs.
Yeah, this is actually a contestant for one of the most appalling things that I have read. It's about what is happening in Canada, and particularly in Vancouver, and it's about legalising of drugs. Let me just read you a little bit, because it's more potent. It's by a chap called Jamie Johnson, who's done a special, it's half-a-page feature in The Telegraph. He said, those who've already had their fix slump lifeless against shop fronts or doze in makeshift tents where many stash guns and knives. In graffiti-covered alleyways, men in hoodies fill syringes with heroin, force the needles into their arms and groan as they feel the liquid going into their veins. Women, wrapped in blankets but still shivering in temperatures of -1 degree centigrade, use blowtorch lighters to melt small rocks of crack cocaine before inhaling the fumes through a plastic tube. Local newspapers describe the street simply as hell. I mean, yeah, I was Minister for Drugs years ago.
Right.
And I always resisted the idea that you should legalise drugs, because once you legalise it, you make out as though it's normal. Here in Vancouver, we are seeing what normal actually means.
Well, what's legalised? I'm not clear what the rules are. I know, obviously, cannabis is legal, but surely heroin's not legal.
Yes.
Really?
Yes, everything has been legalised.
Well, possession is a possession.
But so is use. So is use.
Yeah, but what? I mean, there is a real problem with drugs, particularly Class A drugs. That how do you deal with them? There's been a war on drugs for decades. It doesn't work. In Canada, lots and lots of people.
But we're not like Vancouver.
What? I'm talking about globally, actually. That it's that this isn't happened because it's just being made legal. It happened because it was so terrible. I mean, actually, somewhere like Portugal, I mean, not the most liberal country in the world, which has legalised it. I mean, the point is that if you're going to, I mean, what one does is actually you decriminalise. You don't make it normal, but you help people to get off the hard drugs.
You help them to get off by helping them to get on. I don't get that.
Decriminalising does not help them to get on. But the point
it does,
is,
because someone who might be inhibited from using drugs because it's illegal are no longer inhibited. And of course, the other point, it's a very good piece actually. One of the other points it makes is that, you know, it's one thing, it's bad enough to use street heroin, which has been cut and cut and cut with different substances. Here, people are using, pretty neat stuff, and of course, it's disastrous in the consequences for their health.
To me, the debate always has to be about the classification of the drug, and we forget in this country that alcohol is a drug and it is legal. And where we're looking at Canada, they virtually don't have a drink problem, as far as I'm aware. They certainly have a much higher age for the use of alcohol, and therefore people will get on to weed younger. But I do think there's a huge distinction between something like alcohol and weed and something like heroin or cocaine. And I think that you could argue that if you can legalise alcohol, you can also legalise cannabis.
Well, they have in Canada. I mean, they have legalised cannabis.
But alcohol is low addiction, and so indeed is cannabis. But of course, when people use particularly strong cannabis, that's when you get the problems. But as I say, all I want to say is that, if one looks at a newspaper to tell you things that shock you out of complacency, this is a very, very good piece of journalism.
And I should also point out, is that fourth Johnson op-ed?
I don't think...
Another Johnson this morning giving us the news.
He's got sort of brown,
the last one was
hair,
Daniel Johnson.
So
this one's... who's this? Jamie Johnson.
I don't think he's a product of Stanley Johnson.
OK, you never know.
OK, so that's in The Telegraph. In The Guardian, Scarlett, we're talking about us. It's like a scene from Jurassic Park.
I know.
So we have this phrase, dead as a dodo.
It is. I mean, I love, more than anything, I love the photo, right? This is a photo of a dodo, and by gene editing, we will no longer be as dead as a dodo. They're going to bring dodos back. Somehow in pigeons, right? Because you have to have a relative, yes, and
cousin
pigeons,
of the dodo.
Cousin of the dodo. And I just think it will be completely wonderful to have these weird creatures strutting around.
You get them on GBNews.
Stop it. But no, I agree. And is that a precedent that could be set in terms of other animals that are under threat and with a bit of gene editing?
Yes, I'll tell you. Dodos and all birds are related to dinosaurs, right?
Next, we're going to have the T-Rex.
Yes, that will turn into
There's a few of those around here as well.
Now, who might she have in mind there? She's accusing one or other of us, Eamonn, of being dinosaurs. Or are we both dinosaurs?
Probably.
Yes.
Right.
As David said, that that I was a good old bat.
Unbelievable.
Just before we came in.
Right, shall we turn to Prince Andrew? The Queen has said his route to redemption was to devote himself to charity work. I thought that's what the royals were supposed to do anyway.
Yes. I mean, yes, this is a suggestion in the Mail that Her Majesty, the late Her Majesty the Queen, who had a soft corner for Andrew, it was allegedly both her and Philip's favourite child, and the suggestion was that he could redeem himself in the way that John Profumo had by putting in a lot of work on charity. That was never Andrew's likely way through, and of course, he hasn't done any charitable work, hasn't taken on any.
But also, what charities would say, we want you as our
Well,
patron?
that's a very
This
good
has
point.
been pointed out. Yeah.
Well, I suppose something
I
that's,
thought I'd draw a line.
Something abstract, like, architecture or environmental things, not anything to do...
I mean, the thing about John Stonehouse is it wasn't that he was a patron, it's that he went in as a volunteer and did a lot of cleaning, a lot of manual work for charity. I mean, the thought of Andrew, honestly, when he was our trade envoy or whatever he was, he made life hell for everybody in the Foreign Office. A sense of entitlement. He has more possibly than any other
Eamonn, tell us your story.
Wonderful sense.
I can't tell you my story.
Please. About your name.
I cut a very long story short. I had been comparing a golf tournament at the Gleneagles Hotel, and I spent a lot of time talking to Andrew throughout the day, but my microphone didn't work, so I was like that comedian Norman Collier. So I would say, next on the tape with actors John Connery and Gene Hackman. It was sort of going like that, right? So the mic wasn't working. Anyway, cutting a very long story short, that night, coming out of my room, Andrew came out of his room with his security guards, and he turned in the corridor and he went, "You, sound!" And I went, "Sorry?" He said, "You, sound!" And I went, no, I'm not. I wasn't sound, thinking he meant sound engineer. I said, no, I was the compere, I was the host. And he went, "Sound, man, sound!" And I went, "Look," I'm thinking, "are you deaf?" I'm thinking, I'm not sound. I'm the host. My name's Eamonn, I was the host. He said, What are you talking about, man? You're limping. Are you sound? It's like as if I was a horse with fetlock problems or whatever it is. I'm smoking. And I was limping. And of course I go there and I'll grumble, oh no, Your Majesty, whatever. No, so you're absolutely right, whatever. But he is quite abrupt. So
but also, you know, he does feel entitled. I got on a plane years ago in the Gulf, and I have to admit I was sitting in the first class, okay? And I go to my seat, and there's some creature sitting there covered in a blanket. It was Andrew who decided he preferred my seat to his own.
Yes.
But then, and this was why, I still can't understand why I was so restrained. This is not like me. 2 policemen came over and told me to go and sit somewhere else.
Yes.
A different class or the same?
They were his guards, British police officers, and they were treated by Andrew, as I'm sure by a lot of the others of them, as if they were personal servants. And I keep myself, why didn't I do something about it? I should have got straight off the plane and kicked up a row about it. Because I do not think that someone like Andrew should be entitled to nick your seat.
No.
But he does.
But he obviously does.
He does.
Yeah.
Let's talk, Scarlett, about this man, Andrew Tate.
Talk about dreadful people. So Andrew Tate...
You've moved off the subject of me.
David, are we allowed to talk about anything but you? So Andrew Tate is this terrible, terrible person who, at the moment, is being held in Romania with the possibility of people trafficking. I mean, in particular, women trafficking, sex trafficking. And he's been making lots of videos on TikTok expounding his view that, you know, if women are raped, it was mostly their fault and they have to take thing. And, you know, the way to treat women is to basically say, bitch, you stay at home, you do this. And I mean, obviously a ghastly man.
Would that work with you? Would that work with you?
Oh, you can imagine how that would go
Absolutely, go down. But the problem is it's in schools, right? It's a lot of boys are particularly treated, saying to women teachers, what have you got to teach me? And what happened was that I'll get her name, Alex Davies-Jones, who's a Labour MP, got up at Prime Minister's questions and said, what are we doing about this? Because teachers are actually having to deal with this problem with boys. I mean, you talked about pornography earlier, right? It's all part of the same thing. And she has been inundated with rape and death threats. I mean, it is just terrible. Yeah. And actually, you know, that's what toxic masculinity is about. And the danger is that we sort of talk about these incels, which is involuntary celibacy, but those are losers. Andrew Tate puts himself up as a winner and a role model for boys at school.
And he's still, I was looking at podcasts, I was trying to find something interesting to listen to. He's in the top 5 or something of podcasts, still making money, even though all of us know he's a wrong 'un and he's behind bars. And what he's propagating is really ruining the generation.
Guys, got to say goodbye to both of you, Scarlett and David. Thank you for all your comment and your input throughout the morning. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll see you again next week. Cheers.
Thank you
very much.
Bye.
Now we're going to talk about prisons. And we're going to talk about relationships in prisons between the inmates and the staff.
What's wrong with the world? Honestly, I go from one story to another, which makes me despair. Yes, so this is a huge problem. Apparently, it shouldn't be allowed in my view, but apparently prison staff and inmates are having these illicit relationships, and there are moves being made to try and tackle that rise in the number of criminals who are exploiting those relationships to smuggle contraband into jails. OK,
since 2017, the number of workers exposed to these relationships has grown by 30%. And the Freedom of Information request has told us that retired prison governor and author Vanessa Frick joins us now to tell us more about all of this. Vanessa, you know, you ran a prison. You know what it's about. I mean, staff know the risks involved. They can know that they're being used for these sort of things. What are the attractions, Vanessa? What cultivates the fact that in a pressurised environment like this, that people who are supposed to do good and uphold the law and whatever, with people who do bad, what is the attraction? I'm absolutely fascinated with this.
Good morning to you both. Thanks for having me on. Honestly, Eamonn, I have no idea what the attraction is. Certainly, I never saw it. I think we have to remember that, you know, prisons hold people who don't necessarily want to be there. And in a prison environment, a prison has very specific dynamics at play. In order to maintain good professional relationships between prison staff and prisoners, it's essential that those relationships run smoothly in order for, obviously, the smooth running of the prison. Getting the balance right.
Vanessa, who holds the power? Is the power emotionally with the inmate, or is the power with the jailer, right? The jailer, who you would have thought they have the keys, they have the control. Do they feel superior to the inmate, or does the inmate lever some control over the jailer?
Listen, prisoners have what we all wish we had more of, which is time. They have time to look at prison staff who possibly don't conform to the norms, the rules. They have time to groom, to manipulate, but staff have to be aware of these issues. Don't forget, prison staff come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Many, many of them have had no experience in prisons or what it's like to work in a prison at all. So, over the last sort of 10 years, the staffing, particularly experienced staffing, has been dramatically reduced. That leaves prison staff of all ages and genres in prison vulnerable. And I think it's very important that those prison staff are supported.
Yeah, Vanessa, I'm interested to know, obviously this is not permitted under the rules. As a governor, would you have allowed any staff in your team to have had relationships with inmates? And how do you spot it? How do you crack down on it? I mean, they're saying ministers are going to tackle these affairs, but this is all a bit nebulous. How do you get to the bottom of it all?
First part of your question, absolutely not. Prison staff having illicit affairs with prisoners is dangerous. It's dangerous to that member of staff, it's dangerous to other staff, and it's dangerous to the prisoners. And quite honestly, prisoners can't hold their own water. So what you need is good intelligence systems. That's how you beat corruption in prisons. Also, I think over the years, recruitment, training, all of that sort of has been allowed to subside. The anti-corruption that Dominic Raab is spouting about has actually just been rebranded. When I was at Wormwood Scrubs, we worked very closely with the anti-corruption team at prison headquarters, which was part police and part prison staff. So corruption is not a new thing.
Do you mind if I put you on the spot a bit and just ask you, it just occurred to me whilst we've got a former prison governor on the line, what's your view on this whole Scottish debate around transgender women going into all-female prisons? You don't have to answer if you don't want. I know it's a political question, but, do you think that transgender women should be going into all women's spaces?
I don't, personally speaking, I don't believe that when they've been convicted of violent crimes against women, that they should be going into female prisons and into normal location. We certainly, when I was at Holloway, we certainly had many transgender, both from male to female and female to male, but they were segregated from the general population for obvious reasons.
Really interesting to get your take on that. Vanessa Frake, thanks for indulging me. Former governor of Wormwood Scrubs and indeed, did you say Holloway as well, Royal Holloway? Yes? Yeah, got it. OK, lovely to talk to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thank you very much indeed. Vanessa's retired now as a prison governor.
Tough job, that.
Yeah, it's coming up to 9 o'clock. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we've got the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, on this very, very important day where so many teachers are on strike. What she got to say about that. Is a deal or a conclusion to any of these strikes any closer after this?
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Millions of children are to miss school today on the biggest day of strikes for over a decade.
Hello there, very good morning to you. Thank you for your company. Just after 9 o'clock, Wednesday the 1st of February, you're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. 20,000 state schools in England and Wales will be closed today as teachers kick off their biggest strike action in 30 years.
Now, this is part of the biggest day of walkout since 2011, with train drivers, border force officials, university staff also on strike. Downing Street has warned us all to expect significant disruption.
The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are facing rebellions over their economic plans as senior Tories blame them for dire forecasts. It comes as the Bank of England is predicted to raise interest rates to a new 15-year high tomorrow.
And also a guest before 9:30, the legendary singer responsible for the smash hit Amarillo, Tony Christie, will be telling you why he's not letting dementia stop him from doing the job he loves most.
quite believe that.
What?
Getting Tony Christie in.
Yeah.
I've sung that song so many times on nights out over the years. This has been quite a surreal moment for me. Look, lots of you getting in touch on strikes this morning. Stephanie saying, I think the schools are the next crisis. Look at what's happened in the NHS. Really interesting. Could be onto something there. Yvonne says, I'm totally fed up of these striking people. Where on earth do they think this money is going to come from? And Paul says, of course teachers can strike. It is a right. So thank you for sending in your views this morning.
And the real question is, how's it come to this? How on earth, with so many jobs and professions, have people got to a stage where they have to strike? Let us know your story.
So the big one today, 7 million children missing lessons in England and Wales as teachers join the biggest day of industrial action in over a decade.
85% of English and Welsh state schools will be closed, with the teaching union accusing the government of squandering the opportunity to avert industrial action after talks collapsed on Monday.
Well, they joined teachers in Scotland, train drivers, civil servants, border force staff. They're all striking today as well. It equates to 500,000 people walking out in total.
General Secretary of the ASLEF Train Drivers Union, Mick Whelan, has told GB News a deal needs to be done.
Kept our words, right? Part of the talks were that none of us would talk about what we were talking about, so we had something to talk about. So these people, the employers and the government, that have operated in bad faith. Now people can see there is no workforce reform. Now they can see there's no modernisation. It's just a pure productivity grab, so the privateers can keep their snout in the industry and the workers pay for their privilege to do so. So, yes, there's a cost of living crisis. All workers are feeling it, and in all sectors, at some point, someone's got to take the shackles off and allow people to talk and make the deals that need to be done for the good of the country.
Well, as teachers walk out, our reporter Ellie Costello reflects on this dispute between the unions and the government.
Do you know, that really helped me?
Members of the National Education Union are demanding a fully funded, above-inflation pay rise. Around 23,000 schools will be affected by the strikes. Today, the first of 7 planned walkouts, with both primary and secondary school teachers taking action.
Education is chronically underfunded. There are many teachers and support staff who are relying on universal credit and food banks just to get by. With inflation, over the last 10 years, teachers have lost 23% of their pay and support staff have lost 27%. This then means that a third of teachers are losing the job within 5 years of starting. The government like to say that teachers have had a 5% pay increase recently, but this actually came out of school budgets rather than from the government. So there's now an even tighter squeeze on schools, less money for children, less money for their education.
We strike with a heavy heart. I would much prefer to be in my classroom, educating and supporting my students through their curriculum and through into their exam period. We don't take this lightly. However, some action needs to be taken by the government. One day of disruption, hopefully, might be a catalyst for change in this profession, a change in our salaries, an increase in our salaries. And my concern is if we don't take action now and immediately, that we are going to pay the price, and students will pay the price in 5-10 years' time when this country cannot maintain the national staffing levels in primary and secondary education.
Whether or not the school stays open is up to the head teacher. Teachers have no obligation to tell them whether or not they will be striking, so some parents will arrive not knowing if there'll be a class for their children to attend.
Although I am in a position where I could have them, I'm very well aware that others would not. And I think it's just not a responsible thing to do. As much as I support strike action in the way that they're, the achievement that they're trying to get to, however, actually, not knowing as a parent is very, it's anxious. It's a really anxious, worrying time. So I do often request to take my children out for holidays and are faced with fine action. I just think that 1 minute we aren't allowed to take our children out of school, and then the next minute teachers are allowed to just not turn up.
Some teachers say that post-pandemic industrial action should be avoided.
Well, I don't agree with strike action. I don't think it's going to achieve the desired effect. I am empathetic that, with the cost of living and everything, that teachers do need to be paid more because we do have a recruitment crisis in this country. But I don't think strike action is the most effective way of achieving this.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that teacher salaries in England fell by an average of 11% in real terms between 2010 and 2022.
The government says that most state school teachers in England and Wales received a 5% pay rise last year, which came out of pre-existing school budgets. Talks between unions and the government are ongoing. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Well as schools, staff at 150 universities across the UK also began striking today.
We're going to go to Glasgow now. Glasgow University, our Scotland reporter Tony Maguire is there this morning to bring us the latest. Tony.
Good morning. Yes, behind me here you can see somewhere in the region of about 50 UCU staff outside the front gates of Glasgow University. They are protesting after, it should be old news by now, they were offered 5% pay increase from university bosses, and they're saying that is not enough. Where have we heard that before? Certainly the university sector has about 44 million in reserve, billion, in reserve. And, you know, understandably, the lecturers and tutors behind us here with the UCU are hoping for a slice of that. Later on this morning, I'm going to speak to Mary Senior. She is the Scotland official for UCU, and I'm keen to ask her how SAS bursaries work out into that and how she is expecting university bosses in Scotland specifically, how she's expecting them to be able to afford that. Certainly today from across the UK, expect to hear...
No, go on. Sorry to interrupt you. I was just wanting to hear from you, really. Obviously, the situation with schools in Scotland a little bit different from here in England and Wales. Significant number of days for families there to have to cope with. What's the public support like there? Because at the moment, actually, here in England and Wales, it's just tipping in favour of teachers. But I can imagine with that level of disruption, it might be slightly different north of the border.
Yes, I mean, I certainly think that in Scotland, certainly parents who I've spoken to throw their support behind the teachers, and I think there's an understanding that the 10% that EIS is asking for isn't just in a parallel with the cost of living crisis. The actual job of teaching our young people has changed quite drastically since the Clegg report in the last decade. But no, certainly teachers seem to have, and by the way, we're only halfway through the strike action, you know, at the end of February, and 28th of February and 1st of March, we have 2 national days of teacher strikes, followed by another 22 days.
Thanks, Tony. Got to leave it there. I went to a wedding at Glasgow University. The beautiful chapel.
Stunning. The brick.
Absolutely wonderful.
It's iconic, yeah.
We've got the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, on this very, very important day for a government response to all of this. Ms Keegan, good morning to you. Monday,
good morning.
Hiya. Monday, the talks broke down. Were you even close to a deal?
No, I wouldn't say we were close to a deal, but I wouldn't say they broke down either. They were constructive. We were together an hour and 10 minutes. It's the 3rd meeting I've done with them in January, and then there's been longer and other meetings with officials as well. They didn't break down, but they basically said very clearly, look, we can't do anything to stop this strike. This is going ahead on the 1st of February, but we do have 28 days between this and the next strike, so we will continue those discussions. But what we can't do is offer inflation busting pay rises, because we're really focused on getting inflation down and halving the inflation for everybody, so we all feel better and have more money in our pockets.
With this teacher strike, it's not just necessarily about how exactly you reach a resolution in terms of pay. It's the disruption that's been inflicted on families. I know you're a parent as well. I mean, here we are, 9:10? Up and down the country, there will be families today who've got their kids into uniform, got their backpacks filled, homework already, trotted them to the gate, not sure what to expect. It's been chaotic. A lot of people will say, how did the government let it get to this stage? And I wonder if you can tell me this morning, as Secretary of State for Education, how many schools in England and Wales exactly are actually open? How many pupils are in classrooms?
Well, we don't have that data now, but we're collecting it actually whilst I'm with you on this interview. So later on today we will publish that. We did do a survey and we did also phone up and ring around lots of schools as well. And lots of the schools said, look, we expect the majority of schools to be open, but there may be some restrictions in some cases for some pupils. What I also did was I wrote to everybody and said, look, obviously people have a right to strike, but if you are going to strike, please inform your head teacher, because they're doing a fantastic job, the school leaders and head teachers, to try and keep as many schools open for as many pupils as possible. So at least tell them so that they can do that. So some of them will have done that, but that's what I was urging. But I don't have the power to compel people to do that.
Yeah. If I'm reading you correctly this morning, you were saying Monday's talks fell down over wage demands, and you're saying, look, we can't sanction inflation-busting pay demands. So basically, that's your line in the sand. That's you saying to the unions, we'll talk to you about A, B and C, but you ain't getting any more money, certainly not for the year that has just passed. So where are we going to go? So you're basically saying we ain't budging.
Well, actually, the next round of the independent pay review body has already started, and we were due to complete our submission or give our submission in on Friday. We didn't do that because we all want to give more space for the discussions instead of putting out expectations, etc. But we've said we'll talk about future pay in light of recruitment and retention challenges. We'll talk about workload. We'll talk about how to better support special educational needs in our schools. We'll talk about flexible working. Some people want to look at how they can job share, etc. We'll talk about all of that. I'm here to make sure that our children get a world-class education. To do that, we need fantastic teachers, and we need to recruit the best as well. And I think we have a common objective there.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's a signal then, isn't it, that you perhaps admit that they are underpaid at the moment. The fact that you're talking about the challenges that they're facing within the profession, the challenges that you want to look at in the future is an admission then, perhaps. I mean, we heard from the Prime Minister at the beginning of the year, standing at the dispatch box, or in fact at a lectern, saying, every opportunity that I have had in life began with education. You have to put your money where your mouth is and value as a society what the role of a teacher is.
Absolutely, and we are funding our schools more than ever in history. But just so everyone knows, an average classroom teacher is paid £39,500. The experienced teachers were offered a 5% pay rise. The new teachers, 8.9% pay rise. Progression is also there within the pay bands, which is something specific really to some public sector jobs. 40% of classroom teachers will be getting up to a 15.9% rise this year. And there is also a pension contribution from an employer of 23.6%. So I think when they look at pay and they look at the whole package, they look at, is that attractive enough to recruit? Is that attractive enough to retain? And then they come back with their recommendations. That's why we increase the starting salary to, it's going to be £30,000 for new recruits coming out of uni by September this year. So that was our manifesto commitment. So we are committed to trying to do that, and we will do what we need. When you look at retention challenges or recruitment challenges in particular, it's around maths, physics and computer science secondary teachers. We've said to them, we've put bursaries in place for those, we've made it more attractive, and we said we'll look at differential pay. We know we have to compete for some of these and make sure that we get those skills within our schools. So we have been reasonable, and we actually sat down with the unions and many others in the sector to put together a recruitment and retention strategy, and we're still working on that. I mean, it's been impacted by the pandemic, and you'll hear some of the figures which are bandied around, which are really just a post-pandemic, because we know every sector of our economy has had a dislocated sort of impact on labour. But what we're working to do is to make sure that we do recruit the best and we do retain our teachers.
But can you retain them on 40 grand a year? I mean, you must be getting paid, I'm sure you work incredibly hard, teachers work incredibly hard. You must be getting paid, 3 times more than a teacher would. Would you do the job for the money that they're on? Would you take a 2/3 pay cut to do the job of a teacher?
I actually did take a big pay cut to do this job because I was working in business before, but it isn't about money, you know, that's not why I'm doing this job. But the reality is, if you want to progress in the teaching profession, since we've introduced more multi-academy trusts, which many of our secondary schools are already in those structures, there's a lot more career progression potential as well. So for example, a head of a year or a head of a department or a house will be on about £57,000. A primary school head teacher will be on £74,000, £75,000. A secondary school head teacher of a single school will be on about £96,000.
And then they leave after 5 years, apparently.
Leadership roles, etc.
Which brings me to the next point. You can't retain head teachers. They quit after 5 years, according to the figures. But would you accept, I mean, I take your point on money and you feel you're doing all you can do on salary, but would you accept at all that education in general is chronically underfunded? And don't tell me you're spending more than you've ever done before. That just means you're making up for the money that wasn't spent in previous years.
No, not at all. We spend, as of next year, we'll be spending £58.8 billion on our education system. It's always compared to 2010, which was the highest year ever in spending. That was £35 billion. So no matter which way you look at it, in real terms, in cash, we're spending more. And of course, the £2 billion that the unions demanded to make sure that our schools were well funded, that was the very first thing I dealt with in my role. That was the first letter I got from them on the 25th of October.
And we've said that on this programme.
Obviously it wasn't easy because the economic times were really challenging in the autumn statement.
We have made that point.
And the Prime Minister did agree to that. Well, so this is not being taken into account with a lot of the discussions about our funding. They're kind of not some of the funding numbers I see don't include that.
Yeah, well, we did make that point to Labour, I should say, this morning. Just finally, yes or no, do you think your colleague Dominic Raab should step aside?
I think we should wait for the due process. I mean, I think Dominic
how long does that take?
Actually called for this investigation. I don't know, but I know it's been going on for a bit, and I'm sure it won't be too long, but they are making sure that they get all the facts. I think that's the fair thing to do. I always think it's right to give people due process, yes.
OK.
Education Secretary, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning, this very busy day for you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a break there. Legendary singer Tony Christie about being positive on the face of his dementia diagnosis. How's he coping with that?
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already depressed.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, this is the highlight of the programme, the legendary Yorkshire singer who's been performing the smash hit single Amarillo for the last 50 years.
Bam, bam. So that first came out in 1971, sold 1 million copies then, biggest selling British single then in 2005, and it was re-released alongside that video there, Peter Kay, for comic relief.
Well, now Tony Christie, who is approaching his 80th birthday, is speaking out about his dementia diagnosis, which he says is not going to hold him back, and the show must go on. Great to hear that message. Lovely to see you. Thanks for coming on the programme. Nothing's going to hold you back.
No, nothing at all. And there will be no walkouts on my shows.
Tony, how are you doing, and how is the dementia impacting on you? How is it affecting you?
Not really at all. It's just one of those things. I was diagnosed with it about 2 years ago. Been on very strong tablets ever since, which has knocked it down, and I'm coping with it. It's not really affecting my life. I don't even think about it. I just carry on with what I do, and that's it. I just carry on.
I mean, so many people watching and listening to this interview will either be living with it themselves or have loved ones that are living with it. It's so widespread, isn't it? We all have been touched in some way by this. And we're told that music is a huge help for people who are living with the condition. And I suppose that's handy for you because this is your bread and butter.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's apparently, I just found out that music is one of the cures for dementia, and as you said, thank God I do it. That's what I do for a living, this is going to be one of my busiest years because, as you said earlier, it's my 80th birthday in April, and we're planning tours. We're planning TV shows. I'm recording in Nashville, doing 2 albums during the next 2 or 3 months. And then big tours. It's just very, very busy.
With live performances, Tony, is remembering words a problem? And if dementia, how did you first notice that you were being affected? What went wrong that made you think, I better get this seen to?
Well, I've been recording since 1967, and I've done hundreds of songs. And to remember them, you start putting new songs in your show. And I'm thinking, well, I've not sung that song for 50 years, 60 years. So I use TV, I use stuff on stage that I can look down and just remind myself of the lyrics.
Yes.
It doesn't.
Yeah. There's so many songs. I don't know if it ever annoys you that everybody just keeps talking about Amarillo, but, I did what I did for Maria. and Avenues and Alleyways, which I always thought as a theme song is a brilliant song.
Yeah, it's from the Protectors. Yeah. Well, that's what. Yeah, a lot of my fans they do say that they prefer that song to Amarillo. I mean, Amarillo, it's one of those songs. Every singer in the world wishes they could get one of those songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you and I first met, which was over 40 years ago, do you remember that I did an interview with you at Ulster Television in Belfast? And I finished the interview, Isabel. I finished the interview interviewing this great man, and I said to him, "Tony Bennett, thank you very much indeed." And he came. And he appeared later in the programme and he had a sign. You had a sign round your neck. Do you remember what it said?
I've never forgotten that show. Yeah, Tony Bennett. Yeah.
He had this sign that said, "My name is Tony Christie." So, and ever since that mistake...
So you needed the prompter. You had the early onset there.
Yeah, I have to write down the name of every guest.
Yeah, me too. And it's a difficult thing. But listen, your song, Amarillo, all of the ones Eamonn listed as well, anthems to so many people's lives, spans generations. So fabulous to have you on the programme. We wish you the happiest of birthdays for your 80th in April. And I gather you're performing on the day as well, so you don't even get a day off on your birthday. No. Well, listen, thank you.
I like working, you know. I don't like partying, I like working.
Well, keep well, keep smiling and keep singing. Thank you very much indeed. Tony Christie. There we go. Thank you.
It's working for him. Good stuff. We've got to leave it there. We'll be back tomorrow from 6. Up next, Tom Harwood. Bye-bye.
Thanks for your company.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice,